Chapter 14:15. When Xiao Han had first arrived in the southern region, he had stepped onto Coiling Dragon Peak and received a spiritual energy boost. At that time, he had entered the third-level Emperor realm. Later, his spiritual sense had been damaged by Xianyuan Wuying. Although his cultivation had stagnated, his realm had become more stable. Qingji Han had been in the second-level Emperor realm, but she had broken through the first level of the Emperor realm and stepped into the third level. She had just broken through, so how could she be stronger than Xiao Han? As for her spirit, Qingji Han had the eye of nirvana and was born with strong spiritual power. Xiao Han was even better than her. Xiao Han's bloodline crown was all elemental. The 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, and the wind, light, and thunder elements were all-encompassing. Qingji Han had used her spiritual power to communicate with the 10 statues and unleashed her full potential to make them open their eyes. However, Xiao Han's spirit was all-elemental, so communicating with the statues was effortless. Therefore, the East Continent's first princess loss was justified. After Qin Hao and Xiao Han left, Shou Wuke did not continue to challenge his master's statues. Qingji Han had done her best, but Xiao Han had surpassed it. He was a sword cultivator. He was good with the sword, but he was only good with it. He admitted that he could not compare to the two. After that, Ke communicated with the 9 statues and caught up with Mo Xian. Fairy Qianning also communicated with the 9 statues. A few other cultivators also had good results, which caused quite a stir. However, compared to Xiao Han and Qingji Han, their results paled in comparison. The Divine Herb platform. Unlike the other 4 arenas, the Divine Herb platform was a complete flower bed. In the center of the flower bed was an inconspicuous sprout. It was difficult to find it without careful observation. The sprout was small and fragile, its leaves curled up and glowing with an unhealthy light yellow color. It looked like it could be broken by a gentle breeze. However, it gave off an incomparably strong and tenacious aura. At this time, there were only a few cultivators surrounding the Divine Herb platform. There were only about 100 people scattered around. Compared to the other 4 arenas, the atmosphere here was incomparably bleak. After all, it tested a martial artist's affinity with plants. In other words, only alchemists and pharmacists were suitable to be tested here, as well as some martial artists with plant-type source spirits. But even if it was a plant-type soul essence martial artist, it might not be suitable for this challenge. After all, of the people that remained in Fallen Emperor Bay, which one of them wasn't the strongest of the strong, their source spirits were naturally high quality. The stronger the plant's source spirit, the more terrifying its attacks were. The flower bed's buds rejected source spirits with strong attacks, even if it was the same kind. Therefore, the number of people who could help it grow was pitifully few. Among the few warriors, Qin Hao only recognized Yuning Chang. In addition, Zhou Wudao's subordinate, Tan Geng, was also here. Yuning Chang was Xian Qiue's disciple and a member of the New Moon sect. They had inherited Denda's Pill Dao from the past. Even though Yuning Chang's talent wasn't high and she didn't have any source spirit, she was still very suitable for this challenge. The Divine Grass platform was also the only place where she had a chance to succeed. Needless to say, Tan Geng had a medicinal pot source spirit, and his own soul power was very terrifying. He was also good at medicine, and once relied on the power of the medicinal pot to withstand the devouring of Zhou Wudao's Taotai source spirit. The Divine Grass platform was simply an excellent platform tailor-made for him to display himself. When Qin Hao and Xiao Han arrived, they just happened to witness Yuning Chang's challenge. The black-robed Emperor Yuan gave the lowest standard, which was that the divine grass in the altar had to grow 1 zhang to pass. Yuning Chang used all her skills and only made the grass grow 2 zhang. Her result could be said to be very poor, almost falling to the bottom. However, at least she succeeded in her challenge. Qin Hao wanted to go over and comfort her, but at this time he saw a young man in a white shirt walk in front of Yuning Chang. With a warm smile, he said politely, "Miss, your talent is limited and you don't have soul power to nourish the divine grass. It's really a pity that you can only make it grow 2 zhang. However, from your careful actions, It can be seen that you must be from a big medicine or alchemy sect, and your technique is very profound. Now that you have the qualification to enter the Divine Palace, as long as you are willing to work hard, you will have great achievements after graduation. So, you don't have to worry about this temporary result. Thank you, I don't care. Yining Chang answered very calmly. She knew her own conditions best. Tu Zhang was already the limit of the limit. She was very satisfied that she could enter the Divine Palace and didn't fall out of Qin Hao's team. Miss, your attitude is really good. Let me introduce myself. I'm Northgate Xuanda, a disciple of the East Continent's 7-star medicine department. Northgate Xuanda said with a smug look on his face. Western Liang, Yining Chang. Yining Chang glanced at the young man. He was neither a relative nor a friend, and there was no friendship between them. She didn't have any talent, so why did a disciple of the East Continent's medicine department take the initiative to talk to her? Ying Chang, what a beautiful name. You don't have to be wary. We both study medicine, and I just want to get to know you. When we enter the Divine Palace, we can discuss many things together. Also, with my help, your cultivation will be greatly improved. Northgate Xuanda appeared to be very honest. No one knew what kind of place the South Pole Divine Palace was. He and Yining Chang both studied medicine, so after they entered the Divine Palace, they would definitely be assigned to the same mountain to cultivate. However, at this time, there were too few female cultivators in Emperor's Bay, and even fewer who passed the test. There were men everywhere, and they were all muscular men. It didn't matter that her talent was not as good, but she was quite good-looking. If he could have a physical relationship with her, he wouldn't feel lonely in the Divine Palace. Of course, this was only temporary. Once he left the Divine Palace, he could abandon her. Northgate Xuanda was a genius of the 7-star medicine department, and he couldn't waste his feelings on a woman. What he wanted was a moment of pleasure to satisfy his empty desires in the Divine Palace. With this in mind, Northgate Xuanda felt more and more that Yining Chang was beautiful, and he subconsciously took 2 steps forward to get closer to her. The path of cultivation depends on the person. The seniors in the Divine Palace have given you a quota of 1,000 disciples. If you want to discuss with others, there are plenty of people here. Sorry, I don't have time. Yining Chang turned and left, ready to meet up with Qin Hao. Discuss? She had someone like Denda by her side. Did she need to discuss with others? Missing Chang, please wait. There are also conflicts in the Divine Palace. I just want to make friends and help each other. I have good intentions. Why do you keep me at a distance? Northgate Xuanda stopped her. I said I don't have time. Yining Chang walked around Northgate Xuanda. This person was too enthusiastic. Missing Chang, listen to me. Northgate Xuanda still didn't give up. He was trapped in the South Pole Divine Palace and couldn't get close to women. Whoosh! As a result, as soon as he raised his foot, a tall and imposing figure appeared in front of him. It was Qin Hao, tall and straight, with an imposing aura. What's the matter? Qin Hao's face was cold, and the powerful aura he exuded made Northgate Xuanda involuntarily take a few steps back. Then his face tensed up and became cold. Chapter 14:16. It's none of your business. Get out of the way. Northgate Xuanda scolded. Qin Hao didn't say anything. Whoosh! Zhou Dao, Si Sand, Xiaogua, Shou Wuk, Qin Yun, and the others stepped out from behind Qin Hao at the same time, blocking Northgate Xuanda in the middle. Even though Northgate Xuanda was from the Dongzhou Pharmaceutical Academy, he was still shocked by this momentum. Sister, how should we deal with him? Qin Hao said to Yining Chang, who was beside him. She only needed to answer him, and any one of them would be able to beat Northgate Xuanda to a pulp. Of course, Qin Hao couldn't kill him. The consequences of doing so during the assessment of the Divine Palace were unpredictable. This was also the reason why the Golden Bell platform didn't deal with Chang Hello. But if Northgate Xuanda was beaten to a pulp, the punishment from the Divine Palace wouldn't be too severe. After all, there was bound to be friction within the sect. Northgate Xuanda was surprised to hear Qin Hao call his sister. It turned out that Qin Hao was Yun Ing Chang's younger brother. If he had known about Qin Hao's identity, he wouldn't have acted so coldly just now. However, he was more surprised by the surrounding martial artists. Head Wu Kei, Zhou Wu Dao, Hai Sha, and Qi Shaogua. Any one of them had a terrifyingly strong aura. Although he could not see through the cultivation of these people, the geniuses all had a dangerous aura that made people's hearts palpitate. The higher the cultivation, the clearer this feeling was. Obviously, Northgate Schwanda wasn't a mediocre person. He felt a suffocating pressure from Shou Wuck and the others. This proved that these people were all talented and ruthless. Tell me, how do you want to discuss this? Zhou Wudao stepped out and stood in front of Northgate Schwanda. He was wearing a golden robe and was about the same height as Qin Hao. He looked down at Northgate Schwanda, their faces almost touching. His royal aura was so oppressive that Northgate Schwanda didn't dare to breathe. It's a misunderstanding. Beads of cold sweat dripped down Northgate Schwanda's forehead. Forget it, Yining Chang said. Qin Hao waved his hand, and the crowd dispersed. Northgate Schwanda heaved a sigh of relief. His underwear was completely soaked, and he felt like he had just survived a disaster. It's not up to you to criticize my sister's medicinal skills. I'll teach her and help her if she's lacking. Understand? Qin Hao's voice was calm, yet it revealed a strand of domineering courage. Understood. Northgate Schwanda hurriedly nodded. In the next second, he seemed to have thought of something. His eyes widened as he pointed at Qin Hao and asked, "You taught her?" Northgate Schwanda couldn't help but want to laugh at the questioning tone in his voice. A younger brother teaching an older sister? Yining Chang's grades were so bad that she was at the bottom. How high could her younger brother, Qin Hao's alchemy skills, be? Of course, he didn't dare to say this out loud. After all, there were so many people in Shou Wuck present. But everyone could feel the faint contempt at the corner of his mouth. Tangung, make him understand, Zhou Wudao ordered. Tangung was already on the divine herb platform. His source spirit lit up, and the soul pot flew to the flower bed. The soul pot tilted down, and a clear stream of medicinal power poured out of the pot, flowing through the soil and into the roots of the flower bed. Buzz! A strong brilliance enveloped the flower bed. Under the light of the flower, the weak flower bed grew quickly, and in the blink of an eye, it grew into a tree that was 10 feet tall, and its growth speed didn't slow down. What a strong medicine soul power! A martial artist exclaimed. Northgate Schwanda saw this scene, and his heart was moved. So far, the highest result of the divine herb test was only 4 feet tall. Tangung made a move, and the divine herb grew to 10 feet tall. Obviously, he was very talented. The soul power from the soul pot nourished the tree in the flower bed, and it continued to grow. It didn't slow down until it was 6 feet tall. At this time, Tangung's cheeks were covered in sweat. Rise! Golden flames spun from his feet like a whirlwind. Tangung's depleted soul power was quickly replenished, and his body's condition was better than before. After going through the test of the 10 emperors, he had also stepped into the first level of the emperor realm. The moment he released his cultivation, the divine herb in the flower bed continued to grow. It went from 7 feet to 8 feet, shocking many martial artists. Even Yining Chang was dumbfounded. She knew how difficult it was. She was also a first-level Emperor Realm cultivator, but she had only made the divine herb grow 2 feet tall after using all her strength. However, Tangung had made the divine herb grow 8 feet tall. The difference was huge. His innate source spirit was indeed the standard to measure a genius. However, 8 feet was Tangung's limit. It had almost exhausted his energy in an instant, so he could only give up. It's a little embarrassing. Tangung kept his source spirit and shook his head with a sigh. The other martial artists on the divine herb platform couldn't help but want to beat him up. 8 feet tall. He was only 10 feet away from a perfect result. How could this be considered embarrassing? It's indeed embarrassing. You've embarrassed me. Look at Shou Wuck. On the battle drum platform, he struck 9 times with his sword. On the golden bell platform, he rose 12 feet. If you were half as outstanding as him, the cultivation resources the great Zhou imperial family spent on you wouldn't have been in vain. Zhou Wudao was exasperated when he compared Tangung to Shou Wuck, who was born with the laws of the sword. However, this really scared the martial artists on the divine herb platform. 9 strikes of the battle drum platform, a perfect result. On the golden bell platform, Zhong Sheng rose 12 feet, breaking the perfect record and creating a new limit. Was this something a human could do? Even Northgate Schwanda couldn't help but want to curse. You have the cheek to criticize me? He stepped on the Emperor Road and went through 3 tests of the Emperor's statue. You didn't even pass one. Why don't you compare yourself to Showuk? Tangung said unhappily. Clang! Someone fainted on the ground. Northgate Schwanda felt his head bleed and his eyes rolled back. It's a little embarrassing. I've embarrassed myself. Showuk smiled modestly. Being overly humble is being hypocritical. Even Qin Hao couldn't stand it anymore. He looked at Northgate Schwanda and asked, "Do you understand?" Yes. Northgate Schwanda was very honest this time. However, the test on the Divine Herb platform is different from the other 4 platforms. This swordsman may not be able to perform well here. You don't agree? Qin Hao asked. Haha. Northgate Schwanda turned to face the Divine Herb. His gaze fell on the sprout that had returned to its original form. I admit that I'm inferior when it comes to swordsmanship. However, when it comes to the art of medicine, I'm second. No one in the Bay of Fallen Emperors dares to claim to be first. Even Tangung isn't qualified. After he finished speaking, a fierce soul light flashed, and a medicine staff appeared in Northgate Schwanda's hand. At this moment, he became extremely confident, as if he was a medicine god. He waved the medicine staff in his hand, and beams of light fell on the divine herb on the flower platform. With each beam, the divine herb grew 10 feet taller. Its growth speed was not inferior to Tangung's. Chapter 14:17. A cultivator's ability would differ greatly depending on the attribute of their origin soul. For example, Qin Hao had refined the red lotus fire as his origin soul. His control and perception of flames were incomparable to ordinary cultivators. The red lotus fire was ranked second on the alien flame list. Even geniuses with other alien flames could hardly compete with it. Northgate Schwanda was the same. His origin soul was used as a medicine staff to crush herbs. Whenever a herb came into contact with his origin soul, it would automatically remember its medicinal properties and uses. It would even absorb the medicinal properties of the herb. It was extremely domineering. As a disciple of the East Continent Herb Institution, Northgate Schwanda's status was extraordinary. All the herbs that passed through his hands were of extremely high quality. Therefore, the arrogance in his words just now was also a fact. In terms of swordsmanship, he was no match for Showuk. In terms of alchemy, even Showuk, who was born with the rules of sword, was no match for him. Of course, Northgate Schwanda's alchemy skills were indeed impressive, but his origin soul's offensive power was weak. Even though he had stepped into the Emperor realm, he was still much weaker than other primitive emperors. Right now, Northgate Schwanda waved his medicine staff and infused the divine grass in the flower bed. The divine grass grew taller and taller, and when his soul power reached its peak, the divine grass grew taller and taller. When Northgate Schwanda unleashed his full power and his soul power reached its peak, the divine grass grew taller and taller. Northgate Schwanda gradually surpassed Tangung's nourishment. It's a pity that my cultivation level is too low. I can't reach 90 feet. This is as far as I can go. Northgate Schwanda's body trembled violently. He had exhausted all his soul power, so he stopped nourishing the divine grass and withdrew his origin soul. At this moment, after being nourished by his soul power, the divine grass in the flower bed had not yet reached 90 feet, but it was close enough to surpass Tangung's. Not only were the other cultivators shocked by this scene, but Zhou Wudao and the others were also surprised. Northgate Schwanda of the East Continent Herb Institution was indeed quite capable. Humph, humph. Northgate Schwanda humbly cupped his fists and smiled proudly. Impressive. With such a result, I'm afraid no one in Fallen Emperor Bay can beat him. Brother Schwanda is the undisputed #1 alchemy genius. I admire him. Many cultivators on the Divine Herb platform saluted him. Can you tolerate this? Zhou Wudao was close to Qin Hao, so Tangung being slapped in the face was a small matter. Northgate Schwanda was the #1 pharmacist, so it wouldn't be Qin Hao's style to not make a move. Let's go to the Emperor mirror. Qin Hao didn't take it to heart. He held Xiao Han's hand and left without even looking at Northgate Xuanda. Zhou Wudao was stunned. Was this still the Qin Hao he knew? There was no trace of the Emperor martial arts competition. Let's go. You still understand him. Tan Geng lowered his head and muttered to himself. Before he left, he glanced at Northgate Xuanda. Originally, he thought that among all the candidates who had entered the Divine Palace, except for Qin Hao, no one was his match in the way of elixir. However, Northgate Xuanda's talent was not to be underestimated. As for why Qin Hao didn't make a move, it was probably because he didn't want to. Tan Geng remembered clearly that when they were crossing the inland sea, the battleship was attacked by the demon Emperor Qin Hao. Qin Hao came out of the cabin and fought fiercely at the bottom of the sea. One of Qin Hao's arms was almost bitten off, and there was no part of his body that was intact. His back was pierced, and his internal injuries were even more serious. After he was fished onto the ship, he looked like a corpse at first glance. Even so, after 2 days, Qin Hao had recovered from all his injuries. Who else in the world could have such a remarkable ability? Medicine could kill people, and flesh could regrow bones. That's right. Tan Geng still didn't know what ability Qin Hao used, but if he used the ability to heal himself to water the divine grass in the flower platform, the result was unimaginable. The endless life force would probably reach the clouds, let alone the grass that was 90 feet long. Therefore, Northgate Xuanda's achievement of 80 feet was like a speck of dust in front of Qin Hao. Competing with him would probably dirty Qin Hao's hands. If a body-tempering cultivator stood in front of a primitive emperor and bragged about how terrifying his strength was, what would happen to an Emperor Realm cultivator? He would just laugh. Even if he thought it through, he still felt extremely unhappy that he didn't see Qin Hao teach Northgate Xuanda a lesson. Look, those frogs at the bottom of the well are too ashamed to face Brother Xuanda. They're already running away in shame. Some cultivators pointed at the backs of Qin Hao and the others and laughed. After seeing Northgate Xuanda's terrifying means, they didn't dare to compete with him again. It's not a big deal. I saw that Yuning Cheng's talent was mediocre, so I wanted to help her so that she wouldn't be too embarrassed when she graduates from the Divine Palace. But who would have thought that her companions would threaten me? Pity my benevolent heart. It's our fault for not being good at fighting. We deserve to be bullied. Northgate Xuanda looked up at the sky and sighed, as if the world's pharmacists had been greatly humiliated. No matter how strong their martial talent is, without the help of us alchemists and pharmacists, they won't be able to step into the supreme, transcendent Emperor realm. With Brother Xuanda's ability, you'll definitely become an alchemy emperor after leaving the Divine Palace. After the fallen Dendi, it's your era. When the time comes, they'll cry and kneel to beg you. That's right, I won't refine medicine for them, even if I kneel. My result is 30 feet. After entering the Divine Palace, I hope Brother Xuanda will take care of me. For a time, the Divine Herb platform was full of flattery. Many alchemists and pharmacists formed an alliance. Northgate Xuanda already had the aura of a senior brother. The Emperor platform. This was the last place on the central island to test a cultivator's talent. No one would come here unless it was absolutely necessary. Even if the Golden Bell platform failed the Yuan Qi test, most cultivators would choose to go to the Battle Drum platform or the Stone platform first. After all, the Emperor platform was the last way to enter the Divine Palace. Therefore, the number of cultivators gathered here was the highest, and most of the people who came here were failures. Looking around, the Emperor platform was abnormally large, several times larger than the other platforms. It was built against a mountain wall and looked vast and clean. Other than the figures of the cultivators on the platform, there was only a mirror standing horizontally. And this mirror was the mountain wall itself. Anyone who came to take the test only needed to stand facing the mountain wall. Once a cultivator's figure appeared in the mirror, it meant that they had passed. If not, it meant that they had failed, and the cultivator would lose their last chance to enter the Divine Palace. When Qin Hao and the others arrived, there was a huge crowd in front of them. Fortunately, The Emperor platform was large enough to accommodate almost half of the challengers. Moreover, many martial artists were rushing over from the other arenas. There was an endless stream of them. There are so many people. Brother Han and Bai Xiaotong should be here, Xiaogu said. He stood on his tiptoes and looked back and forth. He and Qin Hao didn't see Shui Han and Bai Xiaotong in the previous 4 platforms. And this was the last test venue. They are in that direction. Xiao Han's source spirit crown faintly appeared, and a surging spiritual aura spread out. It accurately locked onto Yi Shuihan's aura and pointed to the left of the Emperor platform. Hai Sha and Luo Yuliang opened the way. The 2 muscular men waved their thick arms and opened a path for everyone to follow. How is it? Coming to Yi Shuihan's side, Qin Hao asked with a smile. Yi Shuihan was happy. Boss, why are you all here? We haven't started yet. Bai Xiaotong nodded weakly at Zhou Wudao. His hands were clasped together, and he looked very nervous. It seems that this stage is much more difficult than the other 4 platforms. Qin Hao glanced around. Hundreds of cultivators lined up neatly facing the mirror wall at the same time, but not a single person could be reflected. He didn't know why. Well, so far, not a single person has passed. Yi Shuihan said solemnly. He and Bai Xiaotong had come here the moment the assessment began. During this period, they had witnessed thousands of people taking the test, but not a single person was reflected on the mirror wall. Who cares so much? Now that we have all passed the assessment, only the 2 of you are left. Don't waste time, go take the test. Zhou Wudao pushed Bai Xiaotong and urged. If it really doesn't work, I think it's better to change the venue. Xiaogu was a little worried. Not long after they came to the Emperor platform, they had seen thousands of people walk through the mirror wall. As Yi Shuihan said, not a single person was left behind. This Emperor platform was very strange. If Shuihan can pass the test in other arenas, he must be able to pass the Emperor realm. The reason why so many people failed is because these people were eliminated in other arenas. There is no need to change. You can go. Qin Hao didn't know what criteria the Emperor realm used to measure a person's talent, but since it was listed as an assessment venue, it must exist. On this point, the Divine Palace would not lie to the cultivators. Okay, we're going, Bai Xiaotong. Yi Shuihan called out and stepped towards the mirror wall first. At first, Yi Shuihan also thought that the mirror wall was the most difficult level, so he deliberately came here to prove himself. Bai Xiaotong's condition was more special. So far, Qin Hao didn't see any strong points in him. Strength, yuan qi, soul power, and spiritual force seemed to be lacking. If he were to go to the battle drum platform, with Bai Xiaotong's sickly body, he might not be able to play a single drum. Since he chose to stay on the Emperor platform, he must have thought about it several times. Don't underestimate him. His ability is stronger than mine, but Zhou Wudao may not be better. Tan Geng whispered quietly. Qin Hao couldn't help but feel more curious. Brother Shuihan, let me take the test first. If I don't leave a trace on the mirror wall, you can go to other arenas to challenge. Bai Xiaotong seemed to have mustered up a lot of courage to say this sentence. Before Yi Shuihan could recover, he stepped into the crowd of cultivators and stepped towards the mirror wall. Bai Xiaotong knew that with his current physical condition, it was impossible for him to pass the other arenas. The Emperor platform was the only place on the central island where he could test his talent without releasing his strength. If he really had the qualifications to enter the Divine Palace, then he would definitely be able to leave a trace on the mirror wall. After thinking it through, Bai Xiaotong's mood was relieved and a confident smile hung on his face. There were more than 300 people in the group, including cultivators who had been eliminated from other arenas, and those who were participating in the assessment for the first time. At this time, they stood side by side, solemnly facing the stone wall. Among these 300 people, some had no hope and were full of decadence. There were also some who still had a trace of promotion in their hearts and looked quite nervous. Bai Xiaotong stood in the crowd of cultivators. This time, he no longer had a trace of escape. He opened his eyes and bravely looked at the mysterious mirror wall, waiting for an outline to appear in his line of sight. At this time, there was a slight fluctuation of power on the blurry mirror wall. An imperceptible halo of light swept across, spreading from the body of every cultivator. Those who were filtered by this halo would involuntarily tremble. However, what was disappointing was that when the halo swept from left to right, there was no reaction in front of more than 200 people. It was obvious that they had failed the test. When the halo spread to the left, it suddenly stopped at Bai Xiaodong's position and solidified. At this moment, Bai Xiaodong's mind shook. It was as if the power of the great Tao had converged into his body. Everything about him was no secret. Chapter 1418. Xin Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. It's time to make a move. The mysterious energy entered his body, spreading to every inch of his body. It fused with his blood, mind, will, and even his soul. Bai Xiaodong's blood began to boil uncontrollably. He felt as if he had become transparent in front of the mirror wall, with nothing blocking his view. The spectators could see a beam of light reflected off the mirror and enveloped Bai Xiaodong. The light grew brighter and brighter, and finally, it turned into a platinum storm that flew into the void. A vast emperor's aura surged out, and the arena shook. Buzz! On the mirror, a silhouette finally appeared. Although the face was blurry, there was no doubt that was Bai Xiaodong. Oh my god! Platinum Flame! Platinum Yuan Qi was the symbol of the Emperor realm. The Emperor's aura filled the air, and thousands of martial artists were shocked. Success! Tan Geng was overjoyed. He knew Bai Xiaodong's background, and he had always been confident. However, seeing the devastating platinum storm and the Emperor's aura, he could not help but be shocked. Zhou Wudao raised his head. Like Tan Geng, he did not doubt Bai Xiaodong's talent. After all, there was a terrifying existence hidden in the depths of Bai Xiaodong's soul. That existence's talent was not inferior to Zhou Wudao's. I couldn't tell that Bai Xiaodong's foundation was so strong. Xiaoguo was surprised. What kind of existence was Bai Xiaodong? What thousands of geniuses could not do in the fallen Emperor Bei was so easy for Bai Xiaodong. Qin Hao frowned slightly. After activating the red lotus fiery pupil, he saw that the shadow in the mirror was not Bai Xiaodong's appearance. Although the appearance was different, the two had the same aura. It was very interesting. No wonder Zhou Wudao took a fancy to him and brought him to the southern region to participate in the Divine Palace sign. With a smile, Qin Hao finally understood why Tan Geng had such high hopes for Bai Xiaodong. He had only heard rumors before, and he did not believe that there were two people in the world whose souls could coexist. Today, Qin Hao believed it. Brother Shui Han, this mirror is not a bluff. It can really reflect one's shadow. Under the surprised gazes of the martial artists, Bai Xiaodong returned to Yi Shuhan's side. Since he had passed the test, Yi Shuhan could do it too. Congratulations, Yi Shuhan said. He then took a deep breath and stepped toward the border wall. With Bai's success, Bai Xiaodong translation. Translation. Another 100 people. Translation. Translation. And translation. 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 By translation. 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 Translation, 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 the War Drum Platform, the Golden Bell Platform, the Stone Statue Platform, and the Divine Grass Platform. The four platforms tested a warrior's strength, vitality, soul power, and spiritual power. If a warrior's talent reached the standard of the Divine Palace, he or she would be able to join a sect and receive the guidance of an emperor. Translation. The translation of the luck. Qin Hao's eyes fell on the martial artists who were being tested. His red lotus fiery pupil flashed. Vaguely, he could see a hazy gas rising from the top of each martial artist's head. These gases were of different sizes and strengths. Some of them fluctuated violently, while others were very weak. Luck. Showuk was puzzled. Yes. Qinghao nodded. He looked at him and said, people are born with luck. People with strong luck are destined to have great achievements and great opportunities in the future. Some people's luck is hidden very deeply. They may be weak at first, but when they face a crisis or under special circumstances, their hidden luck will be stimulated. Once the time comes, the martial artist who awakens his luck will obtain a talent several times stronger than usual, thus changing his life and destiny. But some people's luck is fixed for life. In short, this thing is very mysterious and difficult to explain, but it really exists. You can understand it as a person's hidden strength, and the mirror wall can completely see through a person's luck. That's right, the mirror wall is testing a martial artist's luck. Ning Tianxing walked over. He had been staying on a mirror wall platform and observing many martial artist tests before he finally understood. He glanced at Qinghao and said with a smile, people are born with luck. Some people are destined to become strong and dominate a region, while others are destined to be mediocre and inactive all their lives. This is fate. The same is true for emperor-level martial artists. Those who become emperors have the emperor's luck. The shadows of those who have the great emperor's luck will appear on the mirror wall. Congratulations, little brother. Ning Tianxing nodded at by Xiaodong in a friendly manner. The other four arenas seemed simple and crude, but the simplest one was the emperor's mirror platform. No matter how strong you are, how powerful your vitality is, or how high your soul power is, as long as you stand in front of the mirror wall, your shadow will fall, proving that you have the emperor's luck. Those who have the emperor's luck will definitely become emperor-level powerhouses in the future, provided that they don't die prematurely. The Divine Palace was still very smart. They chose disciples based on talent first. It didn't matter if they didn't have talent. As long as they had the emperor's luck, they wouldn't have to worry about not being able to become Emperor Yuan in the future. From this, it could be seen that the Divine Palace's ability to train martial artists was very powerful. I see. No wonder so many people can't pass the test. It seems difficult, but it's also very simple. Showuk couldn't help but want to take the test. But since the martial lord once said that he had the potential to become a god, it shouldn't be difficult to leave a shadow on the mirror wall. Everyone can give a try if you are interested, but let me say the ugly words first. Although you have passed the tests of the other arenas, if you don't have the emperor's luck, you still won't be able to leave a shadow on the mirror wall. If you don't have the confidence, don't embarrass yourself, Ning Tianxing said. Everyone looked at each other. Many disciples of the Sword Sect and Arhut Palace lowered their heads. If they couldn't reflect their shadows, how embarrassing would that be? Rather than that, they might as well not try. Even if they couldn't become Emperor Yuan, it would be good to leave some memories. At least they could enter the Divine Palace now. If they couldn't reflect their shadows and were disqualified, wouldn't the loss outweigh the gain? At this moment, many disciples looked at by Xiaotong with envy. Entering the Divine Palace and becoming Emperor Yuan were two different levels of existence. And Bai Xiaodong was destined to become an Emperor Yuan powerhouse. Qinghao, it's time for you to give it a try, Zhou Wudao said seriously. The mirror wall was the last way to enter the Divine Palace. Qinghao disdained to make a move on the previous four arenas. If he missed it again, he would miss the opportunity to enter the Divine Palace. Since you have obtained the inheritance of Senior Martial Lord, you have the Emperor's luck on you. For you, leaving a shadow on the stone wall is a piece of cake, Showuk teased. No. Maybe you didn't understand. Qinghao said that there are strong and weak luck, and the same is true for Emperor Yuan. There is a world of difference between an emperor and a great emperor. Of course, brother has obtained the inheritance of Senior Martial Lord, so it's not difficult for him to leave a shadow. However, the emperor's luck is not ordinary. No one can say for sure how much power he can exert from the inheritance. Ning Tianxing explained with a smile. But this doesn't prevent brother from taking the test. It just so happens that I also want to take the test. Let's see if my Ning family's luck is stronger or if brother has obtained the inheritance of Senior Martial Lord. Are you sure you want to compete with me in luck? Qinghao looked at Ning Tianxing. Chapter 1419. In his previous life, his physical body was destroyed, but his soul was not. Dinda was still Dindi, and he had the fate of a great emperor. Let's not talk about that for now. Who was the martial lord's inheritance? He was the only person in the divine wilderness who had entered the divine realm in 10,000 years. Even though he had not entered the divine realm when he left his legacy, he was still a great emperor and had reached the peak of the second realm. The martial lord had cultivated two types of rule power. His strength was far beyond that of an ordinary second realm great emperor. Let's not talk about that for now. Qin Hao had snatched the divine artifact in the Valley of the Gods, obtained the divine demon blood essence, and cultivated a divine technique. He was already a divine embryo, and when the time was ripe, he would become a god. Ning Tianxing wanted to compete with him in fate? Divine realm fate? Could it be that his brain had gone haywire? However, when Qin Hao saw Qingji Han walk over, he understood. Okay, I'll try my luck. Brother, you don't have to be so serious. It's not a competition between us. It's just a test. Ning Tianxing said magnanimously. As the only direct descendant of the third bloodline, Ning Tianxing's bloodline was the most orthodox. His ancestors were all great emperors, and he must be one too. Not to mention, other than having the most orthodox bloodline, Ning Tianxing was also the prince of the Phantom Fox clan, the descendant of the Beast Emperor and the Beast Emperor's fate. With these two identities, what did he have to be afraid of? Even though Qin Hao had obtained the martial lord's inheritance, it was still someone else's inheritance. He needed to digest it and integrate it into his body. And Qin Hao might not necessarily reach the martial lord level. In other words, he might not be a great emperor, and Ning Tianxing would definitely be a great emperor. Seeing Qingji Han and Mo Xian arrive, Ning Tianxing smiled and nodded. Then, he walked toward the mirror wall with Qin Hao. At this moment, a ball of platinum aura suddenly rose into the sky in front of them. A wave of Emperor Stage aura swept out, frightening Qingji Han and Mo Xian. Everyone looked over and fixed their gazes on Yishui Han. At this time, Yishui Han's body was surrounded by thick water vapor, and the sky was drizzling. Endless light circulated around his body, and in front of him, a clear outline was branded into the mirror. It was much clearer than when Bai Xiaotong appeared, and its aura was stronger than Bai Xiaotong's. Brother Han is amazing. Xiaoguo beamed with joy. Yishui Han was destined to step into the Emperor realm in the future. None of the people around Qin Hao are normal. Zhou Wudao witnessed the rise of another monster. I knew Shui Han could do it. Zheng Qingqi was genuinely happy. I knew it. My father is the great Emperor Luo Shui. How can I not see his shadow? Boss, I did it. Yishui Han danced and jumped back, as happy as child. Thousands of martial artists on the Emperor Mirror looked at him with envy. Brother Shui Han, congratulations. Bai Xiaotong stretched out his hand. Congratulations to you too. Yishui Han gave him a warm hug, and then looked at everyone strangely. Where's boss? Shou Wuk made a silent gesture and pointed to the front. Yishui Han looked over and saw Qin Hao and Ning Tianxing walking side by side. Both of them exuded a majestic aura that could swallow mountains and rivers, as if two emperors were fighting for supremacy. Are you going to compete with boss? Yishui Han chuckled. Just watch, you lucky guy. Zhou Wudao's words revealed a hint of jealousy. Little brother, please. In front of the mirror wall, Ning Tianxing stretched out his hand and gestured. At this moment, thousands of martial artists on the Emperor Mirror had finished the test. Only Yishui Han and Bai Xiaotong were qualified to leave their shadows. Only Qin Hao and Ning Tianxing were left. It could be said that every move they made was watched by thousands of geniuses. Brother Tianxing, you go first. I'm not ready yet, Qin Hao said calmly, his eyes falling on the stone cliff mirror wall. He didn't know if the array set by the seniors of the Divine Palace was strong. If the mirror wall cracked, would they punish him? Okay. Ning Tianxing didn't know what Qin Hao was thinking. He stepped forward and gradually approached the mirror wall. At this moment, a terrible aura spread out from his body, and the platform trembled under this power. As he approached the mirror wall, Ning Tianxing felt his blood boiling. A golden scissors was the first to materialize, floating on the left side of his body. Then, a natural Guqin spirit appeared on the right side. Immediately afterward, a snow fox phantom covered the top of his head. Its 9 tails swayed neatly, releasing an incomparably noble aura, like a king of beasts. The demonic beasts in the field looked up in the air and felt the aura of the 9-tailed phantom fox. They couldn't help but feel a sense of submission. If it weren't for their extraordinary cultivation, they would have knelt down on the spot. Even Sea Sand had to clench his fists and unleash his innate golden ape soul to resist the pressure that was bearing down on him. Buzz! The 3 spirits were released, and the mirror wall sensed it. An incomparably bright brilliance appeared. A ray of light shone out and enveloped Ning Tianxing's body. The brilliance added a bit of Emperor's prestige to his already outstanding temperament. Heavens, 3 spirits. Oh, is this person? Look, a shadow has appeared on the mirror wall. This is the 3rd person to have a shadow. Ning Tianxing's talent was released, and it could be said that it shocked everyone. Of course, the more shocking thing was yet to come. Everyone saw a ray of dazzling light bounce out from Ning Tianxing's position and hit the mirror wall opposite him. The entire cliff trembled under the force, and a dent appeared on the smooth mirror wall. The dent was shaped like a human body, and it became deeper and deeper. It was as if Ning Tianxing had stepped into the mirror wall. His talent was strong enough to reverse the rules of the Emperor's stage. It wasn't as simple as a shadow outline. I've said it before. Even if it's the fate of an emperor, there's a difference between heaven and earth. My fate is the emperor, and 100 emperors will fall. Ning Tianxing's black hair fluttered in the wind. His face was filled with absolute confidence. His cold eyes seemed to be looking down on the world, as if he was the only one in the world. Then, he took a step forward. Crack! Cracks appeared on the mirror wall, and it couldn't withstand his talent. Dust fell, and the dent was half a foot deep. Chapter 1420. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, you'll regret it. A majestic aura was released, and the 3 souls flickered. Ning Tianxing's aura became more and more terrifying. The power of the reflection mirror wall was like a ghost's axe, causing gravel to fly and the pit to deepen. The martial artists watched quietly, but their hearts were already in turmoil. The black-robed Emperor Yuan had given the standard of success, and it was enough to leave an image on the mirror wall. However, Ning Tianxing had completely imprinted the outline of his body into the mirror. Now it was 1 foot deep. He's really strong, Shoak said seriously. Compared to the test of the Emperor's statue, after stepping out of the ruins, Ning Tianxing had some changes. He seemed to have understood the true meaning of martial arts from failure. The most obvious change was in his soul power. His soul power had increased a lot. To be precise, Ning Tianxing's bloodline golden scissors and Guqin spirit had unearthed more power. On the other hand, the 9-tailed phantom fox had not changed. When he was tested by the Emperor's statue, Senior Martial Monarch was obviously dissatisfied with the power of the phantom fox. Even though it belongs to his talent, the phantom fox has a fatal limitation. Now, he is focused on improving his soul power on the bloodline golden scissors and Guqin spirit. Ning Tianxing has seen through it. He will definitely be a difficult opponent in the future, Zhou Wudao said. He knew that Qin Hao had 3 soul powers, which was somewhat similar to Ning Tianxing. Whether it was Qin Hao or Ning Tianxing, the first 2 soul powers of both of them were inclined to attack, and their potential was huge. After all, the stronger the attack, the higher the martial arts, and the wider the world of martial arts. On the other hand, the 3rd soul, the nether tranquil water, and the 9-life phantom fox belonged to self-defense soul power and had a lot of limitations. Although in comparison, Qin Hao's nether tranquil water was more valuable than the 9-life phantom fox, and it was suitable for a wider group of people. As for the phantom fox, only Ning Tianxing could enjoy it. The path he was taking now was the same as Qin Hao's. He focused on strengthening his attack-type soul and expanding the world of martial arts. This kind of change would definitely increase his realm rapidly, and he would become very strong. Buzz! An incomparably vast aura rose into the air, and the world was completely immersed in the platinum light. Under the radiance, Ning Tianxing's face was dignified, like a great emperor who ruled over all things, making people feel reverence. The mirror wall in front of him was distorted, and a human-shaped mark could be seen deeply embedded in it. It was about 5 feet long, like a human-shaped hole, making people tremble in fear. Just by looking at this mark, the geniuses had the illusion of a great emperor's majesty surging towards them. Ning Tianxing dispersed his soul force and turned to face Qin Hao. The corners of his mouth curled up, brimming with arrogance and confidence. Haha, a 5-meter-long imprint I barely pass. Congratulations. Qin Hao was extremely calm. The imprint was 5 feet deep. It was more than just passing. Ning Tianxing's shadow was not only imprinted on the mirror wall, but also imprinted in the hearts of the thousands of geniuses in Fallen Emperor Bay, becoming an insurmountable barrier in their martial path, a peak that they would never be able to climb. If one left behind a shadow, one would have the fate of an emperor. Clearly, as Ning Tianxing had said, this was a 9-star emperor's chi. If the upper echelons of the Divine Palace knew about it, they would be shocked. At that time, wouldn't all the elders of the peaks fight to get him? Even so, in Qin Hao's eyes, it was still normal. Brother, you are so calm. You must be confident that you can achieve the same result as me. Ning Tianxing smiled. I will try my best. Qin Hao walked towards the mirror wall. Same result? If he hadn't received the inheritance of the martial lord, perhaps Qin Hao could do it. Of course, it was only to save some face for Ning Tianxing. But now, he had received the inheritance of the martial lord and had the power of 2 rules. Although he hadn't stepped into the emperor realm, he still couldn't form the great path rules to absolutely bind the enemy. However, Meteor and Burning would also become special skills to enhance Qin Hao's strength. It was hard to say exactly how strong it would be. After all, once it was used, Qin Hao might not be able to control it. So, the same result, this request was a bit difficult, and Qin Hao couldn't meet it. Your Highness, the fate of the great emperor is a sign of prosperity for Marshal Ning in the future. Congratulations, Your Highness, the group of Marshal Ning who accompanied him said in unison. Ning Tianxing didn't care. He glanced at Qingji Han and asked, "What do you think?" "I can do it too," Qingji Han replied calmly. Ning Tianxing smiled. "Then what do you think Qin Hao will do next?" Mo Xian asked. "It's not difficult to become an emperor." Ning Tianxing was confident. But the great emperor doesn't know. Mo Xian looked forward, and his gaze fell on Qin Hao. This was a person he couldn't see through. In Feng City, he thought that if he used both of his souls, he would definitely be able to defeat Qin Hao. At that time, he had absolute confidence. But after coming to Fallen Emperor Bay and passing through the ruins of Yunmeng Mountain, Qin Hao actually stepped out of the royal road and received the inheritance of the emperor's statue. This made Mo Xian realize that even if he used both of his souls, he might not be able to win. Now, Ning Tianxing predicted that Qin Hao could become an emperor, but the great emperor might not. Might not? Sister, brother-in-law will definitely be more powerful than Prince Marshal Ning, right? After witnessing Ning Tianxing's terrifying aura, Kair was slightly worried. That's for sure. Xiao Han smiled as he pinched Kair's tender little face. Was it the great emperor's providence? No. She still remembered the martial lord's voice. She had the blood of the god clan, so everyone in the ruins had benefited. Only Xiao Han didn't improve, and he didn't even teach her a technique. The martial lord obviously wanted to preserve the purity of Xiao Han's bloodline and not be affected by other martial arts. He wanted her to use the power of the god clan. At that time, he also told her a secret. Not only did Qin Hao have the great emperor's providence, but he also had the inheritance of the god clan. That inheritance was much stronger than the martial lord himself. Ning Tianxing wanted to test whether Qin Hao could become a great emperor in the future. He would regret it. Chapter 1421. Origin Emperor Realm Qin Hao stood facing the mirror wall. There was a faint light flickering on the mirror wall in front of him. It was reflected in his eyes as an invisible force gathered around him, trying to enter his body. This was a reaction from the mirror wall's array. Qin Hao emptied his mind, completely relaxing his mind and will. He allowed the array's power to permeate his body, spreading to his meridians and blood. This external force was very strange. After it entered, his blood started to boil. His 3 primordial souls were active, as if the power was out of his control. It wanted to break out of his body and be released to the outside world. Qin Hao didn't resist. He completely emptied his mind and accepted it as much as he wanted. He allowed the array's power to wreak havoc and guide his fate. At this moment, he seemed to have merged with the great Tao of space. He seemed ethereal, but contained everything. Gradually, Qin Hao felt more and more dry. The red lotus fire soul burned crazily like an erupting volcano. He couldn't suppress it at all. He stretched out his left palm and released his soul power. A scarlet flame rose from his palm. The flame was vast, and red light rushed into the sky. Half of Qin Hao's body was bathed in it. Strange flame, Mo Xian said. This was his first soul power. Qin Hao's flame is far from an ordinary strange flame. Zhou Wu Dao added with his arms crossed. At this moment, the serene, tranquil water soul was stimulated by the array and became restless. Qin Hao's left side was burning with flames while his right side was dripping with water. It looked very strange. As his soul power became more and more difficult to control, he let out a low groan. Hua. Suddenly, a watery light gushed out. The clear water flowed into the sky like a heavenly river. It was magnificent. The heavenly river swept out, carrying a torrent of life energy. The clear water covered half of the Emperor's mirror, forming a sharp contrast with the space of flames on the left. Water Soul. The Water Jade Holy Empire's Fairy Qianning was shocked. My boss's Water Soul is far from an ordinary one. Yi Shuihan sneered. His expression was the same as Zhou Wu Dao's. In fact, even without him saying it, everyone could feel that Qin Hao's water spirit was not simple. Just from the aura of life that permeated the air, it was enough to determine that its grade was extremely high. When Ning Tianqing saw this, he couldn't remain calm. During the battle between Golden Light City's Qin Hao and the Xianyuan family, he had been covered in scales. That was definitely another strand of soul force. Counting the Fire Soul and the Water Soul, it was clear that he had 3 origin souls, which was actually the same number as Ning Tianqing. Now that he had inherited the martial lord's legacy, Qin Hao had the Emperor's fate on him. With his 3 origin spirits, it was very likely that he would advance to the Emperor's fate. Then, just as Ning Tianqing expected, a majestic dragon roar was heard, and a giant dragon phantom rushed out of Qin Hao's body. It turned into a huge Dharmakaya and occupied the sky. Its scarlet dragon eyes looked down on all living things, and the dragon's aura was extremely domineering. The 3rd soul. Dragon soul. Heavens, it's another guy with 3 souls. For a moment, the martial artist on the Emperor's mirror became a little nervous because Qin Hao had released 3 souls. Because the dragon's soul, Dharmakaya, occupied the sky and the dragon's aura was vast, it gave people a fierce and cruel feeling. Subconsciously, the thousands of martial artists all took half a step back. Now, those who stayed in the fallen Emperor's Bay were all absolute geniuses. Qin Hao's talent alone was enough to make thousands of geniuses retreat at the same time. This scene was even more shocking than Ning Tianqing's performance. Ning Tianqing's phantom Fox Dharmakaya only affected the demonic beast martial artists. Qin Hao's dragon soul deterred all living things. Born as an emperor, dead as an emperor, reincarnated as an emperor, Qin Hao murmured in his heart. He was quite emotional. Then, he shouted loudly, "You asked me if I have the Emperor's fate?" Buzz! A surge of righteous qi blasted out. It was as if a heavy object had smashed into the mirror wall, heavy and unstoppable. Under this blow, the arena shook violently. Everyone's feet were unsteady. With a loud crack, a crack appeared in the middle of the towering cliff. It was as if lightning had struck, dragging the cliff from the top to the ground. Heavens! Zhou Wudao was so shocked that his expression changed drastically. At this time, the martial artists on the Emperor's mirror were also shocked. Only Xiao Han smiled calmly. She had expected this scene. At the same time, she knew that this was just the beginning. Emperor's fate? What is an emperor? Qin Hao took a step forward. An afterimage flew out from his position. Like an incarnation, it once again slammed into the crack in the mirror wall. The crack was torn another half a foot apart. At this moment, Qin Hao remembered that when he had followed Duanmu Qingwei back to the 10,000 Cultivator Union, the 10,000 Cultivator Union had been besieged. Zheng Qingqi had come to visit. Everyone in the old hall had discussed, "What is an emperor?" Zheng Qingqi had said, "Benevolence is the emperor daring to be the first in the world." The grandson of the right faction's Grand Elder Xiang Bu, Xiang Yamo, had mocked him, saying that the strong were emperors and that emperors were plundering. Qin Hao didn't agree. His vision was beyond the emperor realm. He aspired to become a god. If he couldn't become a god, even an emperor would be no different from an ant in front of a god. Since that was the case, there was no difference between an emperor and a mortal. At that time, Qin Hao actually didn't know the essence of an emperor. It wasn't until Shou Wuk proved his sword Dao to an emperor in the ruins that he had asked Senior Martial Lord what an emperor of the sword was. Senior Martial Lord had replied, "What is an emperor?" This voice lingered in Qin Hao's mind. Now that he was facing the emperor's mirror, he completely understood. The so-called emperor was just a name. The essence of an emperor had no boundaries. In the eyes of mortals, martial artists were emperors. In the eyes of body-tempering realm martial artists, Yuan Zong was emperor. According to this inference, Yuan King and Yuan Venerate were also emperors. It was just that their identities were different in the eyes of the spectators. And gods weren't emperors. Above gods, there were still emperors, god-emperors. Emperors had no boundaries. They could only cultivate their minds. The indestructible samsara technique was activated. Qi condensation, dragon vortex, Yuan armor, spirit manipulation, domain, and nomological laws were stacked layer by layer, allowing Qin Hao to erupt with a terrifying power that far exceeded the Yuan Venerate realm. That power bombarded the mirror wall, causing the cliff to shake more and more violently. The platform that the martial artists were standing on cracked into a dense spider web, giving off a feeling that the sky was falling and the earth was sinking. His three souls flickered and a mighty dragon's aura surged out. The 12 streaks of spiritual energy and the blood essence of the celestial demons also surged wildly into Qin Hao's soul power, essence energy, and while under the stimulation of the array formation. He was uncontrollably excited, as if he had been injected with chicken blood. Because his state of mind had transcended, his realm was flooded by the spiritual energy of the coiling dragon peak. His sea of energy revolved frantically, and in an instant, the barrier of the rank 8 Venerate realm was broken through. He stepped into the 9th level Yuan Venerate realm. The power of Qin Hao's three souls became even more frenzied and strengthened continuously until a beam of golden flames surged into the sky, and he broke through to the Emperor realm. Chapter 1422. His state of mind was clear, and he had broken through to the Renhuang Plain. His vast will spread endlessly, filling the world of the Gulf of Empires. It was as if he was holding it in his palm and controlling everything. It's been a long time. He clenched his fists slightly, and a simple movement attracted the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Endless spiritual qi gathered, and Qin Hao felt that his power had undergone a qualitative leap. At the same time, a dazzling halo flickered between his eyebrows, surging and surging, giving people a sense of power. In the process of the qualitative change of his power, Qin Hao's spirit also underwent earth-shaking changes. An emperor's spirit transformed, peered into the mysteries of the way of heaven, and stood above the world. This kind of transformation came from the inside out, from the state of mind to the power to the temperament. It was somewhat similar to a warrior entering the Saint Plane, but it was also different. A warrior entering the Saint Plane broke the limits of the physical body, flew into the sky, and broke through the earth. It was mainly reflected in the strength of his vitality. The Emperor Plane was another kind of sublimation. The Emperor Plane peered into the way of heaven and stood above all living things. It represented a kind of will, gathering the power of heaven and earth and destroying everything. If one wanted to enter the Emperor Plane, not only did one need to accumulate cultivation for many years, but also a kind of state of mind. Qin Hao naturally had the state of mind of an emperor. What he lacked was cultivation. Now, he was using the pressure of the mirror wall matrix to guide the 12 spiritual qis to break through to the Renhuang plane. The wind raged and swept. On the stage, all the warriors' long hair and clothes fluttered. Those with weaker cultivation couldn't resist Qin Hao's aura and slid back repeatedly. The fate of an emperor plane. Zhou Wudao cried out in surprise, but before he could finish, he slapped himself. New Year, Eve, Chinese network. Calm. The fate of a warrior that was stimulated by the mirror wall was only illusory and not substantial. Qin Hao's aura was like a knife scraping the face. The surging power was so strong that it made people's hearts palpitate. It was not caused by fate, but the violent power produced by the advancement of the realm. Everyone could also see that this was Qin Hao's advancement, not the activation of fate. Although there were thousands of geniuses in the Gulf of Empires, more than half of them had entered the Renhuang plane. However, they had never seen such a powerful aura erupt from someone who had just broken through to the Renhuang realm, including these geniuses themselves. The pressure that Qin Hao brought to them was completely unlike a cultivator who had just broken through to the Renhuang realm. It was more like a cultivator at the peak of the Renhuang realm who had touched the Emperor's path. It was too terrifying. Qin Hao had entered the Emperor realm, and his will was everywhere. He felt as if he had transcended the heavens and the earth. He faced the cracked mirror wall and took a step forward. The power of divine-level laws formed a second illusory clone that crashed into the same spot. Rumble. The mirror wall trembled incessantly, and large pieces of broken stone fell down. This attack seemed like it was going to blast through the mountain. The martial artists looked at the deformed mirror wall. The neat mirror wall had been torn apart, and many places had sharp stone points sticking out, just like a shattered mirror. This was too strong. Just this strike alone had surpassed the depth of Ning Tianxing's branded image. No one dared to imagine if Qin Hao took another step forward. Would this mirror wall, which could withstand the Emperor's providence, be blown apart by him? At this moment, his providence had not even been activated yet. Since I've received Senior's inheritance, I should use the methods of a martial lord. Qin Hao raised his right arm. Resplendent starlight curled around it. At the same time, the flames on the right side of his body burned even more fiercely. It was as if there was a powerful external force supporting it, constantly providing the burning power from afar. There was no limit. On one side, a river of stars soared into the sky. On the other side, boundless tyrannical flames burned the world. Qin Hao was enveloped by the power of the two laws, meteor and burning. His already tyrannical power received an unimaginable increase. Even the power of laws was magnified. As for how strong he was now, Qin Hao did not know. So, he had to give it a try. As Ning Tianxing's face was sweating and his facial features were distorted, Qin Hao's raised arm slowly lowered. Rumble. Suddenly, as if it had been summoned, a loud rumble of thunder rang out in the sky. It was like the bell of the great Tao was ringing to warn the world. Then, a beam of dazzling divine light pierced through the clouds and descended from the 9 heavens, enveloping Qin Hao's body. At this moment, the phenomenon changed. The divine light descended, but it caused the world to lose its color. The world of fallen Emperor Bei had completely turned into the color of ink. Only black and white existed. The mountains, trees, and the darker colors had all turned black. The water and clouds were white. The thousands of geniuses on the mirror wall platform had all turned into black figures with blurry facial features. Only Qin Hao's position was filled with boundless divine light that gathered on his body. Pung! At this moment, the mirror wall could not hold on any longer. The moment the divine light descended, the entire cliff turned into fine powder and collapsed to the ground. It was as if it had been destroyed by the divine light. And Qin Hao's arm naturally did not have the chance to fall. What's going on? Qin Hao raised his hand and froze on the spot. The mirror wall collapsed, naturally dispersing the power of laws and laws. And at this moment, the world returned to tranquility. The divine light disappeared, and the ink-colored fallen Emperor Bei seemed to be dyed. From afar, it gradually returned to its original appearance. Qin Hao turned around. Behind him, thousands of famous absolute elites trembled and their eyes were filled with fear. They didn't dare to move at all. The noble first princess of the East Continent, Prince Ning Wu Ning, Tianxing, Mo Xian, and the others also seemed to be frozen on the spot and looked at Qin Hao in a daze. Among them were Caiyo's friends and family. Only Xiao Han remained calm and composed. Even when the divine radiance descended upon her, she was momentarily dazed. However, she quickly recovered and looked at Qin Hao with a smile on her face. "Is this God?" Showuk mumbled. Chapter 1423. On the Emperor's stage, thousands of warriors tested their fates. In the end, Yi Shuihan and Bai Xiaotong passed, while the rest were eliminated. Bai Xiaotong had the fate of a monarch, and his image was imprinted on the wall. Yi Shuihan also had the fate of a monarch, and his image was clearer than Bai Xiaotong's. At this moment, Ning Tianxing stepped forward and released his 3 souls. The imprint on the wall was 5 feet deep. He had the fate of a 9-star great emperor, and it shocked all the geniuses. Ning Tianxing's result was not only imprinted on the wall, but also left a deep mark in the hearts of the geniuses. He was like a great emperor himself, and his majesty was unattainable. People could only look up to him. Qin Hao was suppressed by the matrix and broke through to the Renhuang plane. Although he did not draw out his fate, a beam of divine light fell from the sky. Suddenly, the world lost its color, and the wall collapsed. There was no platinum flame in the sky, and no fate appeared. There was only a beam of divine light. It came and went quickly, leaving only the ruins of the cliff. Under the ruins, the warriors were silent. Ning Tianxing's image was that of a great emperor. Just now, Qin Hao was someone they did not even have a right to look up to. God. This is God. When the divine light appears, the world loses its color, and all living things are ants. Showuk's voice trembled slightly. He looked at Qin Hao, and his pure heart of the sword was deeply touched. It was as if a heavy hammer had smashed into him, and his heart was bursting with sparks. He had cultivated the sword for so long, and his heart of the sword was flawless. He believed that no one or anything in the world could make him lose his composure. He remembered the first time he felt fear was when he saw his uncle use his sword. That was the first time he experienced the power of a sword emperor. He felt that it was boundless and impossible to resist. Now, Qin Hao showed him the glory of a god, a power that did not exist in the world. When the divine light descended, nothing existed. Showuk finally understood what the martial law meant. What was an emperor of swords? The effect on him was the best proof. The emperor had no limits, and the sword had no limits. Showuk was the emperor of swords. Whoosh! A beam of sword energy shot into the sky and erupted from Showuk's position. Golden sword intent circulated around his body. 4th level emperor realm. The sharp sword sound rose into the air, instantly waking everyone up. Even so, the martial artist's gaze was still firmly fixed on Qin Hao. His expression was one of shock and disbelief. God! The instant the world lost its color, it was as if doomsday loomed over them. Above the 9 heavens, the white-haired cultivator's radiance fell. Was this divine power? Qingji Han, Ning Tianxing, and the others all had mixed feelings. Even though they thought it was ridiculous, they thought the same as the other warriors. If that wasn't divine power, then what was it? It was just that they didn't want to admit it. Cough, cough. It seems that the Emperor Mirror was unable to withstand my Emperor's providence due to my suppression, causing the array formation to malfunction. The mirror wall is actually damaged. Now that the mirror wall has collapsed before you have even attained your Emperor's providence, it's my fault. But in that case, you won't be able to enter the Divine Palace. Ning Tianqing stepped forward to apologize. Was the descent of the divine light the fate of the gods? Obviously, he wouldn't admit it. The Emperor Mirror tested the Emperor's providence. Qin Hao didn't have platinum flames around him, so he failed. Zhou Wudao looked at Ning Tianqing. He'd never seen such a shameless person. What did the collapse of the mirror wall have to do with Ning Tianqing? Was it because the mirror wall couldn't withstand his Emperor's providence that it collapsed? Moreover, he was certain that Qin Hao had failed. Even if Qin Hao didn't have platinum flames around him and hadn't attained his Emperor's providence, his imprint on the mirror wall was far deeper than Ning Tianqing's. This result clearly surpassed Crown Prince Wu's. When the divine light descended, the mirror wall couldn't withstand the suppression of the Great Path, causing the array formation to collapse and the mirror wall to collapse. Even a fool could see that. However, Crown Prince Wu was certain that Qin Hao had failed. What was his intention? Qin Hao didn't expect Ning Tianqing to say such things. He turned around and glanced at the ruins of the broken cliff. According to the rules, Crown Prince Wu seemed to be right. After all, Qin Hao didn't have platinum flames around him, and his Emperor's providence wasn't obvious. Since the mirror wall had collapsed, he couldn't do it again. Thinking of this, Qin Hao looked at the divine grass platform next door. Brother Tianqing, you don't have to feel guilty. The mirror wall has collapsed, but the other platforms are still there. After saying this, Qin Hao's figure flickered and he instantly descended onto the divine grass platform. He floated in the air and looked down at the flower bed and the divine grass. Between the movement and the stillness, no energy fluctuation spread. Qin Hao's psyche power reached him, and he was there. Big brother, what kind of strength is this? Xiaohua had also entered the Emperor realm. He was one level higher than Qin Hao, but he felt that they were on completely different levels. I'm afraid I'm no longer Qin Hao's match, Zhou Wudao sighed. Even though his cultivation level was 4 levels higher than Qin Hao's, he still couldn't compare. At this moment, Qin Hao floated in the air above the divine grass platform and looked down at the divine grass in the flower bed. He also looked down at Northgate Xuanda, the disciple of the East Province Herb Academy. Northgate Xuanda had once made the divine grass grow to the limit of 8 feet, which was a level higher than Tangong's. Now that he was facing Qin Hao again, he was so nervous that he didn't dare to breathe. He felt as if a god was stepping on his head. Qin Hao only needed to use his psyche power to easily crush his skull, even though they were both emperors. If you say you're second in Fallen Emperor Bay, no one dares to say they're first. Qin Hao asked. Gulp. Northgate Xuanda swallowed. The scene of the divine light descending and the world losing color appeared in his mind. He gathered his courage and was about to answer. Whoosh! A string of watery light sprayed out from Qin Hao's arm and covered the flower bed like rain. In the flower bed, the divine grass welcomed the water and entered its roots. Its leaves shone brightly. The light was so bright that Northgate Xuanda was blinded on the spot. He covered his face and let out a shrill cry. At this moment, the divine grass sprouted branches and leaves at a speed visible to the naked eye. It madly devoured the water in the flower bed like a hungry ghost. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a towering divine tree that soared into the sky. Its height couldn't be seen. Crack! Because the divine tree's roots were too big, the flower bed burst. Huge roots that looked like dragons wriggled to the trunk of the divine tree and gradually transformed into a human face. It's so delicious. A tender voice called out to the human face. Chapter 1424. Everything had a spirit. Nourished by the tranquil water, the divine tree had gained sentience. The immature voice, the immature face, and the inarticulate babble made it sound like a naive 3-year-old child. However, the divine tree towered into the clouds, and its trunk was as strong as a mountain. It was like a giant mushroom that propped up the sky. The flower bed, with a radius of 300 meters, was also bursting because of its twisted roots. The roots were exposed to the air like countless furious dragons. Standing under the tree, the warriors were as weak as ants. The visual impact was extremely strong. Northgate Schwanda had the deepest experience of this. As it became a spirit, Qin Hao was also very surprised. As he entered the Renhuang Plain, not only did his level increase, but his water soul had also improved qualitatively. But to gain sentience with a wave of his hand was a bit exaggerated. Yes, it has become a spirit. Father, you're a father. Eat, 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 eat. On the trunk of the divine tree, the immature face of the tree spirit let out a childish cheer. At the same time, a few branches parted the clouds like two outstretched arms asking for a hug. Father! Qin had to know whether to laugh or cry. He looked in the direction of Xiaohan. He hadn't married yet, but he already had a child. Xiaohan couldn't help but laugh. He didn't feel uncomfortable. The divine grass had been cultivated in the flower bed for countless years. The things in the divine palace must be extraordinary. Today, since it had been awakened by Qin Hao's water soul, it was not inappropriate to call him father. Okay, since Xiaohan didn't object, Qin Hao simply accepted it. Eat, father, eat, eat, the tree spirit cheered. There was a thirst in its voice. It was obviously infatuated with the taste of the tranquil water. Change back to your original form first. Eat later. Although the divine tree's appearance was rough and powerful, Qin Hao couldn't bear to refuse its cute voice. Even if he wanted to feed it, considering that they were still in the middle of the assessment, it was really inappropriate. No, eat, 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 I'm hungry. The tree spirit still didn't agree. Next, its roots popped out of the soil. With a boom, it took a step toward Qin Hao. When the step landed, it could be said to be world-shaking. The space of Fallen Emperor Bay was trembling. The martial artists could feel the central island beneath their feet sinking. However, it was only this step. As soon as its foot landed, the divine tree shone with a dazzling radiance. Its huge trunk quickly shrank and turned back into the frail little grass. It swayed in the broken soil of the flower bed. Its two yellowed leaves swayed as if it was telling the grievances in its heart. The corners of Qin Hao's mouth twitched. Even though the water spirit that he had just released wasn't that strong, it was still very powerful. However, this was still the tranquil nether water, the best quality water in the mortal world. It could revive the dead and regrow flesh and bones. However, it only lasted for a few breaths of time before it exhausted the power of the water spirit. This little guy is not simple at all. Qin Hao was secretly shocked. After all, he had become an emperor. Moreover, in his current state, he was far from what an ordinary emperor realm cultivator could compare to. He could even fight against a peak emperor realm cultivator. Moreover, after obtaining the martial lord's inheritance, Qin Hao seemed to be able to unleash a trace of divine power. As for this grass, even Qin Hao's power was easily exhausted. It must have a powerful background. He collected his thoughts and looked coldly at Northgate Schwanda. Qin Hao was still looking down at him. He asked who's first. At this moment, Northgate Schwanda's face was as pale as a sheet. He lowered his head and didn't dare to make sound. The Divine Palace Order allowed the grass to grow to 10 feet. He had the medicine staff origin spirit. Under the guidance of the Eastern Continent Herb Academy, he had absorbed the power of thousands of herbs in the world to help the grass grow to the limit of 8 feet. At that time, he had been so popular. All the alchemists and pharmacists on the Divine Herb platform regarded him as their elder. He had been in the limelight as the future eldest senior brother of the Divine Palace. He enjoyed this feeling of vanity. He claimed that among the thousands of geniuses in Fallen Emperor Bay, he was second and no one could be first. Anyone who wasn't convinced could come and try. At that time, he had already planned to force Qin Hao to make a move. He was waiting for him to make a fool of himself. He wanted to see what kind of useless younger brother or sister who could make the grass grow to 20 feet could have. Now Qin Hao was here. With a wave of his hand, the grass broke through the clouds and rose to the sky. It was difficult to measure, and it had even gained intelligence. How could he measure the height? Did Qin Hao use an immortal technique or divine power? In any case, he wasn't human. This wasn't just Northgate Xuanda's thought. Perhaps all the martial artists in Fallen Emperor Bay thought so too. Seeing that Northgate Xuanda lowered his head and didn't say anything, Qin Hao didn't bother to pay attention to him. He moved his mind and moved to the stone platform. Immediately, all the martial artists looked at him again. What was he going to do? What was this lunatic up to? He had passed and didn't need to be tested again. Qin Hao looked at the 10 statues and smiled. The image of Xiao Han's test appeared in his mind. Life and death contract with the Lord. Holding the Lord's hand until the end of time. She danced below, and the statues formed a group above. She used this to convey her feelings to him. How could an 8-foot man let a girl take the initiative? Buzz. The flames burned and spread to the surroundings. The martial artists on the stone statue platform all retreated in panic, leaving only Qin Hao. This was not because they were giving him face, but because they had no choice but to retreat. Qin Hao stood facing a statue with flames surging on his body. At this moment, the statue took the initiative to emit flames. The flames grew fiercer and fiercer, and the intensity of the flames was as intense as Qin Hao's. The frequency of the flames was also the same. The two of them resonated with each other from a distance, and there was no distinction between them. Entering the Tao with a single thought, Mo Xian mumbled. He and Qingji Han had passed the test on the stone statue platform, so he naturally knew what Qin Hao was doing. He had successfully communicated with the first statue. There were no obstacles, and everything was so natural. It was completely different from the way they communicated with the statues. The net updates the fastest. Mobile phone, /m, com/mo, Xian used his soul energy to invade the statue and communicate with the 9 Supremes. Qingji Han released a vast amount of spiritual energy to move the statues, causing the 10 statues to open their eyes. They had all taken the initiative to attack and then slowly fused together. In reality, it was not perfect. Qin Hao's fire soul came out, and the flame statues took the fire energy and then ignited fire, resonating with him. In other words, the statues were attracted by Qin Hao and spontaneously resonated with him. This kind of gap, even if Xiao Han, who had defeated Qingji Han and had a natural crown origin spirit, could not compare. New August 1st Chinese Network. Calm Qin Hao did not fuse with the statues, but the statues fused with his Tao. This was the true meaning of communication and fusion, and it must be the result that the powerhouses of the Divine Palace wanted to see the most. Boom! On the stone statue platform, the second statue was on fire. This statue was flashing with lightning, and under the lightning, a layer of blood-red flames appeared. Lightning and fire surged at the same time, mixing with each other. Immediately, the third statue's watery light turned into the shape of flames. The fourth statue's vines rolled out like tongues of fire. Buzz, 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 buzz. The 10 statues ignited at the same time, transforming into 10 lava giants. They stood on the platform, surrounding Qin Hao in the center, and the entire platform turned into a world of flames. Seeing this, Qingji Han's eyes widened. The most uncomfortable one was Yu Qianyang of the Blazing Sun Temple. What kind of tyrannical flame this was? It made all the attributes yearn for it, and spontaneously ignited into flames. Once a method is understood, all methods are understood. In the eyes of a peerless sword cultivator, everything in the world can be a sword. In my eyes, everything in the world is fire. Qin Hao raised one hand and clenched his fist. Bang! On the platform, the 10 lava giants slid to the center and finally collided with Qin Hao's position, causing a strong vibration. At this moment, Qin Hao disappeared, and all the statues disappeared. Only a giant hundreds of feet tall stood on the platform, looking disdainfully. Above the giant, blood-red flames surrounded him, as if the fire god had descended to the world. The cold expression completely transformed into Qin Hao's appearance. He knelt down on one knee and faced Xiao Han's direction. His noble eyes opened, and he spoke in a solemn voice that reverberated throughout the heavens and earth. Su Jinyan, for whom do you keep your appearance? But for whom do you keep your infatuation? The world of mortals cannot compare to your gentleness. Let us stay together forever and grow old together. Boom! The martial artist's heads heated up. Hey, dog food. Zhou Wudao's throat was hoarse, and he clenched his fists. It was another confession, but with a different person in a different position. This time, Qin Hao conveyed his feelings to Xiao Han, asking him to take the test properly. I didn't expect that a person like Qin Hao is also a fool. Shouwuk smiled faintly, feeling quite helpless. Over the years, he had been immersed in swordsmanship and considered himself a sword-heart Wuk, but he always felt that something was missing. If there was a beautiful woman beside him who understood swordsmanship, how wonderful it would be to talk about swordsmanship and love. On the solemn test site, Qin Hao used the Way of Flames to melt the 10 statues and gather all the methods into one. His purpose was to convey his feelings to a woman, not to obtain the qualification to enter the Divine Palace. It was unprecedented for him to use the Divine Palace to talk about love. Although this public display of affection aroused the anger of many martial artists, they had to admit that Qin Hao's talent was really terrifying. Of course, the most excited people were Xiaohua and Yishui Han. Marry him, marry him. Xiaohua raised his arms and cheered, taking the lead. All the relatives and friends of Shiliang also cheered. As the soul of the land of Shiliang, Qin Hao's wedding was the most magnificent, the highest standard, and the most popular. The environment of Doabe was not so good, but with all the geniuses of the continent as witnesses, it was still very grand and would be the only one. After all, after today, it would be difficult to gather all the geniuses of the continent. Sister, quickly marry him. Kay was very emotional. She was innocent and young, so she didn't really understand. But she knew that Qin Hao was an indomitable and hot-blooded man. For a very powerful existence like her brother-in-law to be willing to kneel for the person he loved, he had to abandon his self-esteem, put down his face, and endure the disdain of others. If one day Kay met a man like Qin Hao, she would definitely agree without hesitation. In fact, at this moment, Xiao Han was deeply moved. Although there was a voice in her heart urgently calling for her to agree, she shook her head. I don't want to. Thump. The scene fell silent. This time, even Xiaohua and Zhou Wudao were stunned. They looked at Xiao Han in disbelief. Puffed. Xiao Han laughed and proudly raised her head. I'm the little princess of Emperor Xiao, the Princess Jingwe of the Daliao Empire. How can I agree so casually? At the very least, you have to pluck a star for me. You guys are so mushy. Zhou Wudao was really worried for Qin Hao. He thought that Xiao Han was unwilling. However, no matter how powerful Qin Hao was, plucking a star would not be easy. Okay, my little princess. Qin Hao looked around and saw the golden clock on the golden clock platform. It was very bright and big. Chapter 1425. With a thought, Qin Hao's true body left the statue and landed on the golden bell platform. The towering figure was refined by the red lotus tyrannical fire and never separated again. His appearance was forever fixed on Qin Hao's appearance, standing tall in fallen Emperor Bei. Arriving at the golden bell platform, Qin Hao walked past Chang'e Lo and stopped in front of the golden bell. He looked at the golden bell. It was dozens of feet tall, and its surface was flowing with brilliant light. Mysterious Buddhist scriptures were hidden in the golden light, and the chanting of Buddhist monks could be heard vaguely, giving people a solemn feeling. The golden bell gave off an extremely strong formation power, avoiding the impact of brute force and restraining spiritual power. If one wanted to raise it, only vital qi could do so. Chang'e Lo looked at Qin Hao. At this moment, all the martial arts practitioners in fallen Emperor Bei were looking at him. Was he going to raise the golden bell? On the mirror wall platform, Qin Hao's fate had yet to appear, but the cliff had already collapsed. On the divine grass platform, the grass was 3 feet tall. With a wave of Qin Hao's hand, the grass turned into a heavenly tree that reached into the clouds. On the stone statue platform, he used his body as a furnace to refine all techniques into one. He melted 10 statues, and now there was only Qin Hao's Dharma body left, waiting for future generations to comprehend it. Now, they were at the Golden Bell platform. Xiao Han wanted him to pluck a star down. Thinking of this, sweat dripped from a martial arts practitioner's foreheads. Plucking a star was obviously not realistic. If they used a different method to raise a star up, that's seen. Qin Hao lowered his waist and got off the horse. His feet were like ancient trees rooted in the ground. Then he raised his right palm, and endless spiritual qi from heaven and earth gathered crazily. With the activation of the dragon jade technique in his body, his palm was like a black hole that swallowed the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. The center of his palm formed a huge whirlpool of qi. The golden qi roared like a dragon, and a terrifying power that could suppress the heavens filled the air. Boom! The island shook and sank. The surrounding waters of fallen Emperor Bay raised huge waves that were hundreds of feet tall. The sound of the waves rolled, and mist rose into the sky. An incomparably powerful impact pushed the martial artists from the soles of their feet, causing their blood to rush to their heads. Their heads were feverish, as if they were about to explode. When this palm landed, the golden bell on the table broke free from the ground with a bang. It felt like a porcelain bowl that had been pressed down on a firecracker had been smashed into the sky. The afterimage flew through the clouds and disappeared above everyone's heads. It was like the stars returning to the horizon, flickering with Wulin lights. For a moment, there was silence. There was no sound of Sanskrit, no shackles of Buddha's words, and even the golden bell formation was sent far away by Qin Hao's palm. How many feet was this distance? Changhe Lo felt like he was suffocating, and the shock in his eyes was about to overflow. According to the Divine Palace's standards, a bell that rose 3 feet was qualified. The rest of them rose 7 to 8 feet. Even Blazing Sun Holy Hall's Yu Qianyang only rose 8 feet. Changhe Lo first tempted him with a bet, and then requested Qin Hao to personally raise the bell. Qin Hao refused, or to be precise, he felt disdain, claiming that Changhe Lo was not qualified for him to do it. Therefore, Shouwuk stepped forward and condensed nomological sword qi. The bell rose 12 feet, immediately causing a stir on the golden bell platform. What kind of difference was this? Compared to Shouwuk's bell that rose 12 feet, how many feet did Changhe Lo's fusion with his soul weapon rise? A mere 8 feet. Now, Qin Hao had broken through to the Emperor Realm with the help of the Mirror Wall's array formation. With a single palm strike, the golden bell flew into the sky. Was this the result that Changhe Lo wanted to see? Did you get what you wanted? Qin Hao turned around and said coldly. Changhe Lo stared at him. From Qin Hao's body, there was a terrifying, bottomless power that made people feel despair. If it was during the Golden Light City's arena debate, he would have been qualified to fight Qin Hao. Now, not to mention being qualified, he probably couldn't even muster up the slightest bit of confidence. He knew very well that after entering the Emperor Realm, Qin Hao was no longer on the same level of genius as him. Not to mention Changhe Lo, even the true number 1 of the southern region, Shouwuk, or Qingji Han of the East Continent, probably didn't have the confidence to fight Qin Hao. From this day onwards, Changhe Lo and Qin Hao became people from 2 different worlds. So what if you enter the Divine Palace? You will come out one day. I'll wait for that day. Qin Hao walked toward the battle drum platform and brushed shoulders with Changhe Lo. A cold, killing intent made the latter's heart tremble. The matter of the Wenhua Park could be ignored. Even after everything that happened in Golden Light City, Qin Hao didn't have the intention to deal with Changhe Lo until the Battle of Feng City, when Changhe Lo and the elders of the Spirit Beast sect infiltrated the Xianyuan army to destroy the Myriad Cultivator Alliance and kill Qin Hao, and what Cloud Mist Mountain did. This enmity was not over. Qin Hao wasn't just doing this for himself. He also did this for the cultivators of the Myriad Cultivator Alliance who died in the Battle of Feng City. for the Grand Elder who sacrificed himself to protect Nightnet Palace, and for the tens of thousands of families who were shattered that day. Changha Lo deserved death. The cold, killing intent seeped into his bones. Changha Lo's blood seemed to freeze. His fists were pale and trembling because of fear. Since Qin Hao said he would wait for him, he would definitely kill him. In the past, Changha Lo wouldn't care too much. He was Xianyuan Wuying's adopted son. Many people in the Xianyuan family would sacrifice their lives for him. It wouldn't be easy for Qin Hao to kill him. At least, he had to go through Xianyuan Wuying. But now it was different. Qin Hao's oppression was too strong, so strong that it made people desperate. Changha Lo couldn't catch up with him. According to Qin Hao's talent, if he came out of the Divine Palace one day, Xianyuan Wuying wouldn't be able to resist him. Knowing that he couldn't escape, Changha Lo could only wait for death day by day. This feeling, before I used my final trump card, I could still suppress Qin Hao. But now I have no chance of winning against him. If he advances one more level, even if he doesn't use his trump card, I will have to escape. Zhou Wudao sighed. The difference between becoming an emperor and before was like heaven and earth. Qin Hao was born with 3 innate souls and is already extremely powerful. Moreover, he obtained the inheritance of senior martial lord and has the power of rules in his body. Now, if he unleashes his full strength, he can fight against a peak origin emperor or even a half-step origin emperor. Shouwuk looked at the sky. Qin Hao's palm landed, and the golden bell flew into the sky. It seemed tyrannical, but it wasn't too exaggerated. The golden bell was engraved with a Buddhist formation, and its strength was about the peak emperor realm. Shouwuk could naturally feel it through the rules and sword intent. After all, his strength was about the same as the golden bell that activated the formation. Therefore, Shouwuk couldn't break through the limits of the golden bell. After Qin Hao entered the emperor realm, his strength surpassed the golden bell by a bit. The golden bell lost its resistance to his vitality and didn't have any resistance. Whether it rose 10 or 500 feet, it was meaningless. When the warriors saw the golden bell flying into the sky, they were just shocked by the sight and spontaneously thought that Qin Hao wasn't human. It's a bit difficult to pluck a star. How about rising a star? Stepping onto the war drum platform, Qin Hao turned around and shouted to Xiaohan. I heard that other people's weddings have war drums. Do you have one? Xiaohan replied with a smile. Everyone. Zhou Wudao's face darkened. The warriors of Emperor Bei were already numb. Of course. Qin Hao was ready to make a move. I don't think there's a need, right? Lei Jiao was on the war drum platform. He saw Qin Hao hit the golden bell with one palm. He didn't want to let Qin Hao make a move anymore. Dong! Qin Hao ignored Lei Jiao and punched. The 9 war drums were arranged in a line. One drum shook, and the 9 drums sounded together. The terrifying fist force penetrated the drum skin and transmitted to each other. The space rippled with turbulent sound waves. The sound waves spread toward the entire Emperor Bei. It's not loud enough. Xiaohan shouted. Dong! Qin Hao punched a second time. Golden scales covered his fist. The dragon power in his body roared. His pure physical strength shook the drums 9 more times. The 9 drums sounded together and merged with the 9 drum sounds from before. The former sounded 9 times, while the latter sounded 9 times. 18 sounds spread out. The sky was like thunder echoing. It's not loud enough. Xiaohan continued. Sister-in-law, I think we should forget about it. Sayogwa covered his ears with both hands. He was scared witless. Go to the side, single dog. Don't disturb them. Kay, glared at Sayogwa. The latter's face was filled with grievance. Huh? Qin Hao roared in a low voice. Above his right fist, a dazzling light shone as he activated his right fist palace. In that instant, his strength erupted once again. Pure physical strength was channeled into the dragon's soul. A fist light visible to the naked, I pierced through the 9 drum skins. Following that, another 9 sounds rang out. 27 sounds reverberated in the air. Boom! Boom! The sound of the great path descended from the sky. It was as if the sky was about to collapse. 27 drum sounds echoed. The rumbling sound connected and turned into a sea of drum sounds. At that moment, thousands of martial artists covered their ears with both hands. Their brains churned, and their heads felt like they were about to burst. At the same time, Qin Hao also felt an incomparably turbulent rebound of energy. The 27 drum beats poured into his body. The drum beats overlapped, and their power was terrifying. It was already difficult for an ordinary martial artist to withstand the impact of 6 drum beats. Even someone as strong as Tsaowa vomited a mouthful of blood when he faced 8 drum sounds for the first time. Now, the 27 drum sounds were wreaking havoc in Qin Hao's body. They were shattering his flesh, organs, and meridians. Rather than saying that they were destroying, it was better to say that they were tempering and pushing him to the limit. For a moment, Qin Hao's blood was boiling. A numbing feeling penetrated his dragon scales and passed to his fist. This was a rare opportunity to train. Good, Qin Hao shouted loudly. The 3 rays of light reached his left ankle and penetrated his right ankle. The power of the 9 palaces opened 3 palaces, and his legs became even more stable. It was as if he was welded to the table, firm and indestructible. Then, the 4th punch was thrown. Dong! Boom! Boom! 9 drum sounds rang out again. The 4th time, 36 drum sounds reverberated in the sky, causing cracks to appear in the sky. An incomparably tyrannical force wreaked havoc in his body. Feeling a trace of danger, the dragon soul became even more violent. Following that, an even more terrifying force condensed on Qin Hao's fist. Not only his fist, his entire right hand turned into a ferocious dragon claw. Pung! Another punch. The 5th punch, 45 sound. Pooh! The terrifying drum sounds oppressed the world. The hundreds of martial artists present could not bear it and spat out blood. Then, they sat on the ground and released their sore spirits, beginning to resist the fierce drum sounds with all their strength. But Qin Hao did not stop. Dong! The 6th punch fell, 54 sound. Dong! The 7th punch, 63 sound. With a cry, Qi Xiaohua, Qin Yun, and the others all spat out blood at the same time. The sound of the drum of the great path shook, impacting their internal organs, and they were caught in the sound waves. Like the other warriors, even they were meditating and adjusting their breathing, releasing their primordial spirits to resist the terrible sound. Sister asked brother-in-law to stop. Kay also sat on the ground and was prepared to spit out blood. It was not that she felt sorry for Tsaowa and the others, but that Qin Hao might not be able to bear it if he continued to fight. Brother Qin Hao stopped fighting. Xiaohan also considered this point. But how could Qin Hao stop? The raging force rampaged in his body, like 10,000 hammers that would hammer him thousands of times. Half of the 12 strands of spiritual qi he had obtained from the coiling dragon peak had been consumed under the suppression of the Emperor's stage array. Perhaps with the help of the drum, he could refine the remaining spiritual qi and break through to the next level. It would be a waste to stop now. A ball of starlight covered the golden dragon claw. Qin Hao punched the 8th time. The surging fist was like a meteor hitting the drum. Pung! The drum shook. 8 punches, 72 sound. Pooh! Zhou Wudao, Si Sand, and Mo Xian, and the other super geniuses of the continent spat out blood at the same time. They sat on the ground like obedient children. On the drum platform, Lei Jiao was sent flying. His body was entangled by the sound waves, and he fell off the platform. His face was covered in blood as he looked at the person beating the drum wildly. Chapter 14:26. 8 punches, 72 echoes, shaking heaven and earth. The violent drum sound slammed into his body like a wave. Qin Hao's bones cracked, and his blood seemed to be evaporated by the drum sounds. Along with that, the serene water flowed through his body, and a strong power nourished his body. Every time his bones cracked, they would reform. The cycle repeated, tempering his body. Using the drum sounds to cleanse his body, Qin Hao wanted to break through to the first level of the Emperor realm. At that moment, the cultivators of Emperor Fallen Bay looked at the person beating the drums. He was like a reincarnated demon, unstoppable. The 72 drum sounds reverberated. In the sky, thunderclouds rolled. The might of the great Tao turned into lightning, tribulation, and struck down, spreading through the vast space. The void turned into a sea of lightning. Bolts of lightning as thick as pythons fell, bombarding Qin Hao's body. They cleansed his body. Bathed in the lightning, he stood tall. Then a dragon soul avatar roared out, swimming in the lightning. Qin Hao gathered the second rule of the martial lord. Flames burned on his dragon fist. It was the power of burning. Burning could burn the dragon's soul, fire soul, and water soul, making the power of the three souls rise again. It made his fist even fiercer and his recovery even stronger. Bang! Another punch blasted out. The ninth punch. 9 drums sounded together, merging into 72 echoes, forming 81 drum sounds. At that moment, the cultivators of Emperor Fallen Bay felt like their heads were about to explode. Their wills were about to be destroyed by the sound of the drums. Those as strong as Ning Tianxing, Shou Wuk, Qingji Han, and even Xiao Han all had blood dripping from the corners of their mouths. They quickly sat down cross-legged, and origin souls bloomed behind them. Soul power and origin chi interweaved, forming a strong Emperor Realm barrier, blocking the impact of the 81 drum sounds. When that punch landed, Qin Hao's sleeve directly exploded. The place he stood collapsed half a meter deep. His stomach was in turmoil. The first drum in front of him fell back and exploded into pieces. Boom, 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 boom. Continuous explosions rang out. Under everyone's shocked gazes, the 9 dark green drum skins on the battle drum platform were penetrated by the fist light one after another. They kept falling backward. Every explosion was like an explosion in the warrior's heart until the 9 battle drums were reduced to dust. Crack, crack, crack. Lightning fell from the sky and flickered on the surface of Qin Hao's body. Amidst the lightning, Qin Hao's aura grew stronger and stronger. On the contrary, the lightning grew weaker and weaker, as if it was being absorbed into his body and refined. When the lightning dissipated, the dark clouds in the sky dispersed, and a powerful golden flame rose into the sky. The 12 streams of spiritual energy had completely merged with Qin Hao's Qi. He, on the other hand, had stepped into a second-level Emperor realm. The stage sank, the war drums were destroyed, and the 81 drum beats gradually subsided. But this shocking sound wave was forever imprinted in the minds of the martial artists of Emperor Fallen Bay. At this moment, Qin Hao was destined to become immortal. Countless gazes were fixed on him. They felt that the figure standing on the war drum platform was incomparably majestic. This monster, Zhou Wudao, wiped away the trace of blood at the corner of his lips and stood up from the ground. He shook his head and smiled wryly when he sensed Qin Hao's aura as he stepped into second-level Emperor realm. His words really did come true. If he were to fight Qin Hao again, he'd have to flee even if he didn't use the sunset arrow. He really is a monster. Shou Wuk swallowed the blood in his mouth. He had to admit that he, who was born with the natural law of the sword, would have to flee if he fought with Qin Hao. Crown Prince Ningwu, is this what you meant by borrowing external power? Zhou Wudao smiled at Ning Tianxing. On the Emperor Road, everyone had been suppressed by the 10 Emperor's aura and suffered the calamity of the Emperor realm. At that time, only Qin Hao's cultivation had remained stagnant. It wasn't just the Emperor Road. The Emperor's path on the Emperor Road was the same. Ning Tianxing had used this as an excuse to accuse Qin Hao of relying on external power instead of true ability. Now, Qin Hao had broken through to the Emperor realm with the help of the Emperor Mirror's formation. Then, he had used the sound of the war drum to break through to second-level Emperor realm. Borrowing external power? His cultivation hadn't improved? That was because he hadn't reached his limit. Now that he'd reached his limit, Qin Hao had advanced from 8th level to 2nd level Emperor realm. Were they happy now? Ning Tianxing didn't reply with a sullen expression. He knew when he'd stepped out of the ruins that Qin Hao hadn't relied on external power. Otherwise, the martial lord wouldn't have handed over the inheritance. What else could he say now that Zhou Wudao was pointing at him and ridiculing him? Big brother, you're too cruel. You even broke the drum. They were both second-level emperor realm, but Xiaowa felt that the gap between them was so great. Idols are always meant to be worshipped. Yi Shuihan replied. The drum platform. Qin Hao took 2 deep breaths and slowly walked over to Lei Jiao, who was lying on the ground. He extended a hand and smiled. Brother Lei, are you satisfied with my performance? You. Lei Jiao snorted heavily, but didn't refuse. He grabbed Qin Hao's hand and stood up. You win, he said with a sigh. This sigh represented Lei Chuan's defeat. At the same time, he and Qin Hao had buried the hatchet and turned weapons of war into gifts of jade and silk. Lei Jiao wasn't stupid. How could a terrifying opponent be more precious than a peerless friend? Although he'd been tricked by Qin Hao on Cloud Mist Mountain, they were the ones who'd made the first move. Qin Hao was willing to let bygones be bygones and let bygones be bygones. He was more magnanimous than Lei Jiao. Congratulations, big brother. Boss, you're amazing. Brother Hao, it looks like I'll never be able to close the gap between us. Everyone walked over, feeling extremely excited. Qin Yun sighed. Once upon a time, his little brother, who could be intimidated by his sacred psyche power, had unknowingly grown into an existence that he looked up to. He remembered that at Broken Dragon Cliff, Qin Hao couldn't compete with the Wasteland's 3 great families and relied on him alone. But now, the 3 great families have been reduced to dust. Umph! Xiaohan glared at Qin Hao. His white clothes were torn and stained with blood. He didn't take his safety seriously. Didn't you ask me to beat the drum? I still have to pluck a star. Qin Hao said, I even asked you to go to heaven. Why don't you go up and show me? Xiaohan stared at him. Talk back? I'll go to heaven sooner or later. Qin Hao stopped Xiaohan with his arm and pulled her into his embrace. He kissed her on the cheek. Can you agree now? Xiaohan was about to answer shyly. Buzz. Above the void, space fluctuated as a tall, black-robed figure stepped out, looking down at the thousands of geniuses under his feet. Greetings, Senior Divine Palace. When the black-robed Emperor Yuan appeared, all the geniuses bowed at the same time. The assessment is over. According to your results, those who pass stand on my right side, and those who don't stand on my left side. The black-robed Emperor Yuan issued a majestic order. For a moment, all the geniuses looked at each other and spontaneously walked to the 2 sides. Most of the martial artists' attitudes were very sincere, and they stood in line according to their results. However, there were also some guys who wanted to make up the numbers with a fluke mentality. They obviously didn't meet the passing standards, but they also followed the team to stand on the right side of the black-robed Emperor Yuan. As a result, before they could reach the place, they were smashed into ashes by the black-robed Emperor Yuan. After killing several people in a row, no one dared to stand in the same place. As the person with the best results, Qin Hao naturally stood on the right side, and his position was the closest to the front. Even Xiaohan, Shou Wuk, Qingji Han, and the others all stood behind Qin Hao, making him particularly prominent. This was probably the status that was exchanged for strength. In just a few breaths, the 2 teams were completely in line, and there was a clear distinction between them. On the right side were those who passed the assessment, and they were about to become official disciples of the Divine Palace. But on the right side, the number of people was quite miserable. Although the black-robed Emperor Yuan gave a minimum of 1,000 places 3 months ago, on the day of the assessment, there weren't even 800 people who passed the assessment. There were only about 750 to 760 people. The team on the left side was much more vast, and the losers accounted for 90% of the total number. Hundreds of thousands of geniuses from aristocratic families and imperial family members participated in the assessment. They crossed mountains and rivers to the inland sea, broke through the interception of the sea demons, and went through 3 months of hunger and tempering. In the end, only 6,000 people survived. On the left side, there were more than 5,000 people. It could be seen how difficult it was to pass the assessment of the 5 arenas. But the black-robed Emperor Yuan didn't care. He had his eyes on the best batch of seeds in the continent, and he also prioritized the right side. He nodded and said, "Very good. You are all talented and have obvious strengths. In the future, you will all be qualified to become a great emperor. From this moment on, you will become official members of the Divine Palace." "Thank you, Senior." Qin Hao led the 700 people and cupped their hands. "As for the people on the left, how you came and how you left." The black-robed Emperor Yuan said coldly. "Yes." An incomparably depressed voice came from the left side. Everyone lowered their heads, as if they were incomparably ashamed. There was no pattern to the opening of the Divine Palace every time. They knew very well that they might not have a second chance to participate in the assessment in this life. After all, on the surface, martial artists who were over 30 years old were not allowed to participate in the assessment of the Divine Palace. The next time a Divine Palace opened would be at least a few hundred years later. "Okay, next, I will teleport you into the Divine Palace first. After you arrive, someone will guide you to be under the name of the elders of each peak. During this process, remember that no matter what happens, you must not panic." The black-robed Emperor Yuan looked at the crowd on the right, and then his gaze fell on Qin Hao. He continued, "You step out." The cold tone came, and everyone on the right was startled. Someone was going to step out? Why? The martial artists who didn't know the reason subconsciously raised their heads at the same time. At this time, they saw the black-robed Emperor Yuan Shi's finger pointing down, just pointing at Qin Hao. "Me?" Qin Hao was surprised. "Senior, why do you want me to step out?" Since the black-robed Emperor Yuan Shi wanted to send the disciples who passed the assessment back to the Divine Palace, Qin Hao, who had the best results, was singled out and excluded. What was the reason for this? "You have the great emperor's providence and are destined to be an emperor. Since you have such a great opportunity, why do you need to be trained by the Divine Palace? Step out, let's go." The black-robed Emperor Yuan Shi said, his tone indisputable. "Senior, this is unfair." Showuk took a step forward and looked at the sky. Qin Hao's providence has yet to appear, and the Emperor Mirror has collapsed. On the divine grass platform, the grass transformed into a divine tree, towering into the clouds. On the stone statue platform, he merged everything into one. The golden bell soared into the sky, and the war drums sounded 81 times. We admit that we can't surpass any of them. Since the Divine Palace even accepted us, why can't we tolerate Qin Hao when he is so talented? Senior's orders. Who are you to question? Changhao Lo couldn't help but be overjoyed, and he scolded Showuk. It's not that we can't tolerate him, but even if he goes to the Divine Palace, no one can teach him. In that case, why waste everyone's time? He has the great emperor's providence and is destined to become an emperor. The world is so big, where can't he cultivate? The Divine Palace can do it, and so can the outside world. The black-robed Emperor Yuan Shi gave an explanation. Although there were some reasons, his tone revealed his determination. Qin Hao is not allowed to enter the Divine Palace. Chapter 14:27. This came as a great surprise to everyone. The chosen with the best results should have enjoyed the best treatment in the sect. But this was not the case. Not to mention equal treatment, they were not even allowed to enter the sect. The warriors sighed. It was not a good thing for a person to be extremely talented. If they were so strong that no one could teach them, this was the saddest thing in the world. Some people were happy that Qin Hao could not enter the Divine Palace, and others were sad. Changhao Lo was in a good mood. If he could not enter the Divine Palace, he could not learn any techniques. Even if Qin Hao was destined to become an emperor, without the guidance of the Divine Palace Peak Master, it would greatly delay the time for him to enter the Emperor realm. This undoubtedly delayed Changhao Lo's death and gave him a chance to fight back. Ning Tianxing's worried brows relaxed. The Divine Palace's foundation was unfathomable, and there was no lack of extremely powerful emperor techniques. He knew that the great emperor level was also divided into several realms. Although Qin Hao had received the inheritance of the martial lord, he did not know much about the emperor path. So what if he entered the emperor realm? So what if he became a great emperor? If there was no one to guide him on the path of cultivation, he would stop at the emperor realm. Ning Tianqing was different. In his family, the great emperor was at the peak of the second realm, and he had an innate guide. Moreover, if he cultivated in the divine palace, he would come in contact with the guidance of many emperor realm seniors. And Qin Hao did not have any of these. New August 1st Chinese Network. Calm. According to what you said, those who have the great emperor's fate do not need to enter the divine palace. In that case, Prince Ningwu also has the great emperor's fate. Should he also be included? Shouwuk continued. Ning Tianqing could not help but be shocked. He pointed at him and said, Shouwuk, you've gone too far. Am I wrong? The Tianqing crown prince is quite powerful. I'm afraid that the divine palace will not tolerate you. Shouwuk said. You. Ning Tianqing was so angry that his whole body trembled. Wuk. Qin Hao took a step forward and gestured for the other party to restrain himself. On the surface, Zheng Dynasty and Ningwu were allies after all, and it was not good for their relationship to be too stiff. Qin Hao looked at the black-robed Emperor Yuan and said, I came from Western Liang. Western Liang is barren, and martial arts are in decline. Since I was fortunate enough to participate in the Omen, I should enter the palace to learn the great Tao and prosper my homeland. Even if I have the destiny of the great emperor, what's the use of it if I can't enter the great emperor's path? The elder also said that the world was so big that there was no place to cultivate. The outside world could do it, and vice versa. Could it be the same in the divine palace? Why can't I enter the divine palace? Zhou Wudao's eyes lit up, and he secretly gave a thumbs up. There was nothing wrong with what he said. At that moment, many people who had passed the test were discussing this in private. The divine palace was teaching the world and did not fear the land or the 100 clans. If they could not even accept the most outstanding candidates, then the fairness of the test would be questionable. You insist on entering the divine palace? The black-robed Emperor Yuan said in a majestic voice. I hope Senior will agree. Qin Hao bowed. Forget it. You can return to your position. The black-robed Emperor Yuan said. Thank you, Senior. Qin Hao returned to the team, and Sayogwa and the others couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. At this moment, everyone felt a little puzzled. According to Qin Hao's performance, the divine palace should be more than happy to accept him, but the black-robed Emperor Yuan had the intention to exclude Qin Hao. However, everyone didn't think too much about it. Maybe it was just like what was said before, and there was really no one in the divine palace who could teach Qin Hao. If that was the case, it would inevitably damage the reputation of the divine palace. After all, even the great emperors wanted to save face. Your results have already been sent back to the divine palace. Next, I will activate the array formation to send you all over. The peak masters of the 7 peaks of the divine palace will send you invitations based on your results. As for which peak you want to join, you can decide for yourselves. An incomparably powerful force was born. The black-robed Emperor Yuan's palm pressed down, and it was as if the heavens were suppressing him, wanting to open a transmission channel. Senior, wait a minute. Qin Hao hurriedly said. What do you want? The black-robed Emperor Yuan's tone was displeased, and his palm stopped. I still have a companion who hasn't arrived yet. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Qin Hao put his finger in his mouth, and a loud whistle came out, mixed with vitality that spread to the fallen Emperor Bei. From afar, a demonic beast flapped its wings and flew over. It was the dog spirit. On the back of the dog spirit sat 2 young men, one in black and one in yellow. The moment the restriction of the fallen Emperor Bei was lifted, Ahei and Huang were able to exert the power of their beast souls and transform into human forms. Roar! The dog spirit directly flew into Qin Hao's space ring with the 2 of them. During the Battle of Yunmeng Mountain, they intercepted the Xianyuan family's pursuit and later hid among the mountains. Now that Qin Hao had returned to the divine palace, he certainly couldn't forget these 3 demonic beasts. Brother Qin Hao, they're still full. Xiao Han pulled Qin Hao's sleeve and glanced at the grass in the damaged flower bed. She had a strong feeling that it would be of great use if it was full. Qin Hao smiled and said a little embarrassedly, "Senior, I don't know what the grass in the flower bed is. If you don't mind, can this junior take it if you want?" It was originally an ordinary spiritual herb growing on the Divine Palace's Taiwei Peak. Because it has absorbed a lot of spiritual energy in the past thousands of years, it has caused its spiritual soul to mutate. Today, it has been nourished by your medicine soul and has given birth to spiritual consciousness. Since it has recognized you as its master, it doesn't make sense to force it to stay. The black-robed Emperor Yuan waved his hand casually, and the grass in the flower bed was wrapped in brilliance and fell into Qin Hao's palm. "Thank you." Qin Hao put the grass into the space ring and raised it under the beast spirit tree. At this time, an earth-shattering force pressed down on the top of their heads. More than 700 disciples of the Divine Palace who passed the assessment were shrouded by the invisible power of the Great Path. The ground under the feet of the martial artists cracked inch by inch, and beams of platinum light penetrated the cracks and surrounded everyone on the right. "Activate!" As soon as the black-robed Emperor Yuan's voice fell, the earth suddenly trembled, and the river water of the Imperial Gulf set off waves. An incomparably dazzling platinum light shot from the island straight into the sky, as if it had pierced through the sky. With a buzzing sound, more than 700 people on the island disappeared in the light in the next moment. At this time, more than 5,000 geniuses standing on the left all side. This light rose into the sky, indicating that a new era was about to begin in the divine wilderness continent. The 700 people who disappeared were the rulers of the new era. In the future, they would be Emperor Realm Almighties, able to summon the wind and summon the rain. And they were just foils. "We will take our leave." More than 5,000 people saluted. Immediately, figures soared into the sky, summoned their primordial wings, and flew in the direction they came from, ready to return to the inland sea and return to their families. And this time, they were afraid that they would be in danger again. However, at this moment, the space suddenly seemed to have solidified. The central island was bound by the power of the Great Path, and the spiritual energy between heaven and earth disappeared. The primordial wings of the martial artists who rose into the sky dissipated, and their figures continued to fall back. "Senior, what is the meaning of this?" someone asked in surprise. This power of the Great Path that bound heaven and earth was naturally the work of the black-robed Emperor Yuan. As soon as you enter the Divine Palace, your soul will no longer exist. Do you think the 100% mortality rate is a joke? The sacred platinum aura of the black-robed Emperor Yuan disappeared, and in its place was a thick black liquid that lingered around his body, full of endless evil. Rumble. The central island sank, and amidst countless mournful screams, the river water surrounding the Imperial Gulf turned into a sea of blood. The blood river churned, and green skeletons drilled out of the river. With the resentment of death in their hearts, they covered the sun all day long and rushed toward the 5,000 candidates on the island. Chapter 1428. In a moment, more than 5,000 candidates were eaten up by the resentful spirits, leaving behind skeletons all over the ground. The scene was like purgatory. The cultivators lost their source of spiritual energy and were unable to gather their vitality and origin souls. How could they resist? After they died, they also turned into resentful spirits. Immediately, the ghost energy that covered the sky disappeared into the blood river. The black-robed Emperor Yuan floated calmly in the void, disdainfully looking at the thousands of corpses below. Even though these corpses had outstanding talent when they were alive, and they were the elite descendants of the major families of the continent, many of them were members of the royal family. In his eyes, they were no different from ants. Over the past thousands of years, he had long been used to it. However, today he kindly gave Qin Hao a way out and let him leave this imperial bay. But he didn't expect that Qin Hao insisted on entering the Divine Palace. This was courting death. Actually, it wasn't his original intention to leave Qin Hao way out. That junior had obtained the inheritance of Lord Wu, which meant that, like Lord Wu, he also had the potential to become a god. This was the nutrient that the black-robed Emperor Yuan urgently needed. Qin Hao's death could bring him great benefits. A cold-blooded person like me should have nothing to do with this mortal world, but I actually became compassionate because of a ridiculous family relationship. The black-robed Emperor Yuan laughed at himself a few times and looked up at the sky. There were no gods in the divine wilderness, and he vowed to become a god. In order to become a god, he killed countless people. The people he killed were the strongest and most talented people in the world, generation after generation. He knew Qin Hao, and they were quite familiar with each other. Qin Hao obtained the inheritance of Lord Wu and attracted the divine brilliance. Maybe as long as he refined him and buried the peerless geniuses of Shou Wuke with him, he would be able to achieve his wish of stepping into the god realm. He had been waiting for this day for thousands of years, starting from the day he personally destroyed the divine palace. The world spun as they were enveloped by the formation energy of the great Tao. Even though it had only been a few breaths of time, Qin Hao and the others felt as if countless years had passed. Just when the people in the array couldn't hold on anymore, the dazzling platinum light dissipated. As their feet landed on the ground, everyone opened their eyes again. The scene in front of them was brand new. This was a vast and boundless world. 7 majestic mountain peaks were suspended in the air, with white clouds lingering around the waist of each mountain peak. There were red-crowned cranes flying freely in the clouds, and waterfalls from the 9 heavens were sloping down from the sky, making rumbling sounds. 7 majestic palaces were placed on top of the mountain peaks, giving people a sense of solemnity and grandeur. This whole scene was like a fairyland in a painting, so beautiful that it was impossible to take in. Where are we? Xiaogua had never seen such beautiful scenery before. Was this the immortal world? Idiot! Of course, it's the divine palace. Yi Xuehan lightly slapped Xiaogua's head and jokingly scolded him. However, the scenery was indeed beautiful. Even though he was born in the most prosperous Luo Shui Empire in western Liang, Yi Xuehan was still intoxicated by the fairy-like scenery in front of him. This is the Divine Palace, the highest academy in the Divine Wilderness, the cradle that nurtured Emperor Yuan. We have finally become disciples of the Divine Palace. Senior brothers and junior brothers, we are about to become the protagonists of a new era. In the future, we can all become emperors. For a time, the martial artists who came to the Divine Palace couldn't help but cheer wildly. Many people cried tears of joy, unable to extricate themselves from their emotions. So this is the Divine Palace. Qin Hao sighed. The spiritual energy between heaven and earth was really rich, many times stronger than the outside world. With such superior innate conditions, the cultivation speed of martial artists would definitely be able to advance by leaps and bounds. It would be difficult for them not to become emperors. By the way, why didn't I see Xing? Qin Hao asked Yi Xuehan. This question had troubled him for a long time. Since the team gathered at Imperial Fallen Bay, everyone was there, except for Xing. Boss, Sister Xing Xiao Jiu stammered and finally gritted her teeth. She went to the East Continent, so she didn't participate in the Omen with us. To the East Continent? Why did she go to the East Continent? Qin Hao asked seriously. He had a bad feeling in his heart. I don't know. On the first day of everyone's departure, Aunt Yu talked to her alone. I don't know what they said, but she gave up participating in the Omen and went to the East Continent alone, Xiao Jiu said. Aunt Yu was Yi Xuehan's mother, the former master of Dangu and the dean of Red Sun Academy, Xinqua. Qin Hao's face instantly became serious. Others didn't know, but he could guess a thing or two. Xinqua sent Xing to the East Continent to inquire about information. It seemed that Western Liang would make a big move next. Of course, if they were to send troops to the East Continent, it was not impossible to send someone to investigate Sunset Peak and Daqin in advance. The key was that it was too dangerous for Xing to be alone, not to mention that the girl was good-looking. Don't worry. Master must have her reasons for sending Miss Xing there. I don't think there will be any accidents. Yuning Chong saw the change in Qin Hao's expression. Although she didn't know who Xing was, she must be extraordinary to be chosen by Xinque. We'll talk about this after we leave the Divine Palace. Qin Hao said in a low voice, feeling a little dissatisfied. At present, he had just passed the assessment and came to the Divine Palace, so he couldn't interfere with the people outside. In fact, he didn't attach too much importance to the matter of taking back Sunset Peak and crusading against Han Ling Han and Zhan Wu. On the other hand, Xinque was more obsessed with it than Qin Hao. But since Yuning Chong said so, Xing safety should be guaranteed. After all, Yuning Chong disappeared to meet the descendants of Zhang Lang in the southern region. Now that Xing went to the East Continent, could it be that Xinque had found out about the descendants of the other four war generals? Would it be Yufeng or Qincheng? Qin Hao couldn't figure it out now. For now, he could only step into the Emperor realm in the Divine Palace first, and then make plans. He hoped that when he went out, Western Liang would not be in chaos. Dong, dong, dong. A few solemn sounds of bells came from a mountain peak in the clouds. At this moment, the noisy crowd immediately quieted down. Everyone knew that the peak masters were selecting disciples. Congratulations to the juniors for coming to the Divine Palace. The Divine Palace has the method to enter the Emperor realm and the way of the Great Emperor. However, the peak masters of the 7 peaks cultivate differently. You juniors can choose which peak master to study under according to your strengths. Once you enter the peak, you will remember it for life. A vicissitude and extremely majestic voice came from the clouds, making the sacred paradise even more solemn. The voice continued, Tai Wei Peak, the master of the way of life. The master of the peak is Tai Wei, immortal. Yun Yi Peak, the master of the way of array. The master of the peak is Yun Yi, immortal. Yao Guang Peak, the master of the sound of 10,000 laws. The master of the peak is Yao Guang, immortal. Daozong Peak, the master of the way of the world. The master of the peak is Daozong, immortal. Xiantian Peak, the master of the inscription technique. The master of the Xiantian, immortal. Mizang Peak, the master of the way of killing. The master of the peak is Mizang, immortal. Every time the voice mentioned a peak, Qin Hao would see a word flashing on the peak. In the void of Tai Wei Peak, there was the word life. Yuni Peak, the word formation. Yaowang Peak, the word sound. Daozong Peak, the word Dao. Xiantian Peak, the word tool. Mizang Peak, the word kill. Each peak represented a different direction of cultivation. Except for the peak in the middle, which was the main peak of the Divine Palace, and also the place where the Palace Master cultivated, there were no big words floating on that peak. All disciples of the 3rd rank and below can choose a peak of their own. The Master of the Peak will teach from time to time. During the teaching period, you can listen to whatever is said. Do not make a noise, do not ask questions, and digest the teachings of the Peak Master on your own. 2nd-rank disciples can also choose a peak. When a Master of the Peak is teaching, you are qualified to ask the Master of the Tao and ask for guidance. 1st-rank disciples, pending. The voice said. At this time, everyone realized that a token was tied to their waists. This token was the Divine Palace token that they had obtained through the challenge of the battle platform. Now, a number appeared on everyone's Divine Palace token. Some were engraved with 3, some with 2. Qin Hao, Xiao Han, and the other people who had achieved perfect results in the 5 challenge rings were engraved with 1. This meant that the best group of people were 1st-ranked disciples of the Divine Palace. Chapter 1429. The disciples of the Divine Palace were divided into 3 ranks. Obviously, the 1st-ranked disciples were the most talented, and the 3rd-ranked disciples were the weakest. When the 7 peak masters preached, the 3rd-ranked disciples could only listen and were not allowed to ask questions. The 2nd-ranked disciples could listen and ask questions. If they encountered something they did not understand, they could ask the peak master for help. As for the first-rank disciples with the highest talent, it was unknown what kind of treatment they would receive. In the void, the majestic voice paused for a moment, giving the disciples time to choose the 7 peaks. At this time, more than 700 people were looking at the 7 peaks. The peaks were suspended in the air, surrounded by white clouds, and were equally majestic. Within each mountain, there were several incomparably tyrannical auras. Among them, the strongest aura gave off a suffocating feeling. Qin Hao first looked at the mountain peak with the word life floating above it. This mountain peak was named Tai Wei Peak. As far as the eye could see, the mountain peak was covered in lush greenery. The endless smell of spiritual herbs permeated the air, refreshing the mind. Moreover, the spiritual energy that enveloped Tai Wei Peak was obviously the densest among the 7 peaks. Here, the path of life was the holy land for cultivating alchemists and pharmacists. On the left of Tai Wei Peak was Uni Peak. The word array floated on the peak. The headmaster was Uni Immortal, who taught the way of array. On the right was Yao Guang Peak. The head of the peak, Yao Guang Immortal, was proficient in the sound of 10,000 laws and taught the way of music. These 3 peaks were located on one side of the main peak of the Divine Palace. On the other side was Daozong Peak. The word Dao floated on Daozong Peak. The headmaster, Daozong Immortal, cultivated all the methods of the world and gathered vitality, soul, and spiritual force in one. It could be said that it was the most desirable peak for martial artists. Next to Daozong Peak was Xiantian Peak. The head of the peak, Xiantian Immortal, established himself with casting inscriptions. His means of refining weapons and magic treasures must be extremely terrifying. If a martial artist's talent was limited, how could they strengthen themselves? Of course, it was to obtain more powerful weapons. Therefore, many disciples of lower ranks would rush to Xiantian Peak. Compared with the second-rank and first-rank disciples, they naturally did not have a sense of superiority. They could only use the method of strengthening themselves with weapons. On the last peak, the word kill floated in bloody light. Qin Hao looked at it and his spirit trembled. It was as if evil spirits had invaded his body and destroyed him. This was the place where the Mizar battle monarch passed down the Tao. It was in charge of killing all the treacherous people in the world, killing all those who deserved to be killed. It was an extremely tyrannical method to enter the Emperor's Tao through killing. The path of cultivation in the 7 mountains was different. Disciples had to choose according to their talent. Once they entered the mountain, they could not change their path. In a short moment, the 700-plus people were divided into 7 groups, each corresponding to one of the 7 peaks. Among these 7 groups, Daozong Peak had the most people with more than 300 people. Next were Mizar Peak and Xiantian Peak. As for Yao Guang, Supreme Micro, Yin E Peak, and the others, each peak only attracted 40 to 50 people, and even Yin E Peak only attracted 20 disciples. After all, among the candidates, there were very few alchemists, array masters, medicine masters, and musicians. The number of people who passed Fallen Emperor Bei's test was even fewer. Most of the warriors naturally wanted to cultivate Yuan Qi and Yuan Spirit. If it wasn't for the fact that Uni Peak was too deserted, a portion of these 20-plus people wouldn't have come. It was only because there were too many disciples going to Daozong Peak that they chose Uni Peak. Martial artists were all very smart. Sometimes, having fewer people was also an advantage. Very good. Once you enter the mountain, you can't change your path. Next, if any of the peak masters want to accept personal disciples, you can start from the first-rank disciples. The majestic voice continued. Suddenly, Lei Jiao and the others were shocked. Personal disciples. They were actually accepted as personal disciples by the peak masters. It was too exciting. The other second-rank and third-rank disciples who had already stood in line looked at them with burning eyes. It was an honor to be accepted as a personal disciple by a peak master. Personal disciples were similar to biological sons and daughters. They didn't get the best, used the best, and learned the most profound emperor's art. It was really enviable. On my God-seeking herb platform, 2 disciples made the herb grow 8 feet tall. Northgate Schwanda, Tangung, are you willing to be my disciples? A powerful voice came from Supreme Micro Peak. Suddenly, the void trembled. I'm willing. Northgate Schwanda shuddered, and he fell to his knees in excitement. No need to bow. What about you, Tangung? The voice continued. I'm willing. Tangung bowed. All right, the two of you will be my personal disciples, said true Lord Taiwei. Supreme Micro's happy laughter came from Supreme Micro Peak. Chang Hello, Himo, Xian, Ning Tianxing, Su Jin, Lan Qingwu, are you willing to come to Yawang Peak and cultivate the art of music with me? An extremely beautiful female voice sounded. It was Yawang Peak's Yawang Peak, an empress expert. Her voice is so beautiful. The eyes of many warriors lit up. Naturally, there was no lack of powerful figures at the level of Great Empress in the Divine Palace. However, when they heard this extremely beautiful voice, they couldn't help but feel inexplicably excited. They really hoped to meet this Yao Guang immortal master. Of course, the disciples who had just entered the Divine Palace didn't dare to have any improper thoughts. They just admired her. I'm willing. As soon as the voice fell, four figures stood out. Changhalo, Mo Xian, and they practiced the zither. Naturally, they wouldn't miss the opportunity to become a personal disciple of the Peak Master. Su Jin and Lan Qingwu were also very talented musical instrument cultivators among the candidates. Su Jin's primary spirit was the flute, and Lan Qingwu's was the pipa. Although they were slightly weaker than Changhalo and Mo Xian compared to the remaining candidates, they were many times stronger. Yawang Peak also noticed their achievements. However, Ning Tianxing didn't step out together with them. He was hesitating. His gaze fell on the central peak of the Divine Palace. He knew that that was where the Palace Master cultivated. His wish was to become a disciple of the Palace Master. Ning Tianxing, are you willing? Yawang Peak asked again. Although Ning Tianxing didn't give a response immediately, she still didn't want to miss it. After all, Ning Tianxing showed the great emperor's fortune on the emperor's stage. His image mirror was 5 feet tall. Since he had the Guqin spirit, he was most suitable to be a disciple of Yawang Peak. Forgive me for being stupid. The art of music is too difficult. I can't bear it. Ning Tianxing thought about it again and decided to refuse. It doesn't matter, Yawang Peak said calmly. There was a hint of regret in her tone. How could a genius who showed the great emperor's fortune be a fool? It was just an excuse. Although it was a pity, Yawang Peak wouldn't force him. Later, the 4 of you will enter Yawang Peak. Yes, master. Changhalo and the other 4 said. Mo Xian glanced at Ning Tianxing. How could the prince of Mo Luo not see through Ning Tianxing's plan? Ning Tianxing refused Yawang Peak because he was clearly focused on the Divine Palace's main peak. Perhaps Ning Tianxing thought that only the Palace Master was worthy of being his master. After all, his talent was too strong. However, Mo Xian sneered inwardly. Comparing talent? Was he stronger than Qin Hao? If there was no Qin Hao, perhaps Ning Tianxing could try to enter the main peak. Now that there was a monster like Qin Hao, his wish was probably going to fall through. The Palace Master would also choose Qin Hao as his disciple. Daozong Peak cultivates the Tao of all things. Ordinary martial arts, Qi techniques, the power of the essence soul, and Qi techniques can all come here. An extremely old voice came from Daozong Peak. It was obvious that perfected Lord Daozong was not young. What was different was that perfected Lord Daozong didn't specifically point out the names of the first-ranked disciples. He didn't take the initiative to invite them. Instead, he asked the most outstanding disciples to come by themselves. It was obvious how confident perfected Lord Daozong was. Disciple Shou Wuk is willing to enter Daozong Peak. Shou Wuk was the first to step forward. Yu Qianyang is willing to enter Daozong Peak. Yu Qianyang didn't want to fall behind. Although his results weren't perfect, he still received the first-rank disciple token. Since Shou Wuk was going to Daozong Peak, he definitely had to go too. Zheng Qingqi is willing to be a disciple of perfected Lord Daozong. Disciple Zhou Wu Dao is willing to enter Daozong Peak. Disciple Qianing is willing to enter Daozong Peak. Disciple Feng Qianli is willing to enter Daozong Peak. In an instant, everyone was fighting to be first. Just like the third-rank and second-rank disciples, the most outstanding disciples were also the ones who joined Daozong Peak. Agreed. Perfected Lord Daozong replied with a single word. After a pause, he seemed to have thought of something. His old voice continued. Xiao Han, Qingji Han, are you willing to be my disciples? Disciple. Xiao Han looked at Qin Hao. Qin Hao nodded. Disciple is willing. Xiao Han stepped out of the line and stood with Shou Wuk and the others. Perfected Lord Daozong cultivated the Tao of all things. His research on essence, soul, and qi was definitely extremely profound. The Seven Peaks was the most suitable place for Xiao Han to go. Good. Qingji Han, what about you? Perfected Lord Daozong laughed happily. Disciple isn't willing. Qingji Han said coldly. She glanced at Xiao Han. If he hadn't spoken first, she might have considered joining Daozong Peak. Now that Xiao Han was going, Qingji Han wouldn't go with him. Princess. Mo Xian wanted to say something, but stopped. He was afraid that Qingji Han would have the same idea as Ning Tianqing. However, how could the main peak of the Divine Palace be so easy to enter? If they agreed to perfected Lord Daozong's request, they would at least have a spot as a personal disciple. If they didn't agree, it would be too late to regret it. Han Qingji turned a blind eye to Mo Xian's anxiousness. Humph, rottenwood can't be carved. In Daozong Peak, perfected Lord Daozong scolded without giving face. My uni peak cultivates the world Dao 10,000 formations. Just like Daozong Peak, anyone who cultivates formations can come here. Perfected Lord Uni's voice sounded. He didn't name anyone, but he didn't have as much confidence as perfected Lord Daozong. He probably thought that even if he named a disciple, they might not come. As expected, the scene was silent. No one responded to perfected Lord Uni. Although the other third-grade and second-grade disciples were anxious, the first-grade disciples with the highest talent were indeed unwilling to cultivate formations. A pitiful generation, a foolish generation. Perfected Lord Uni said angrily. Xiantian Peak accepts blacksmithing disciples. Mizar Peak accepts disciples. Next, the Xiantian deity, Lord and Mizar Battle Lord spoke. Their expressions were simple and crude. Surprisingly, the strongest blacksmith in the Divine Palace also had a female voice. Especially when the Xiantian deity Lord's voice sounded, Qin Hao couldn't help but feel nervous. He seemed to have confirmed something. Disciple Haisha is willing to join Mizar Battle Palace. Disciple Lei Jiao is willing to join Mizar Battle Palace. Disciple Zhan Yi is willing to join Mizar Battle Palace. Mizar Battle Palace was in charge of killing. It was filled with violence and beauty. It specialized in physical combat. Haisha and Lei Jiao had long set their sights on joining Mizar Battle Palace. It was the same for Zhan Yi. Disciple Hao Zhixing is willing to join Mizar Battle Palace. Disciple Yi Yao is willing to join Mizar Battle Palace. Little Nine and Yi Yao said. Qin Yun and Ah Ku had second-grade disciple tokens, but they were not fated to become the peak Lord's disciples. Brother Melon. Qin Hao gestured at Siowa and pointed at Xiantian Peak. Disciple Siowa is willing to become Senior Xuantian's disciple. Siowa bowed in the direction of Xiantian Peak. At this moment, the first-grade disciples had all been selected. They had become the Peak Lord's personal disciples. The treatment they received was far better than second-grade and third-grade disciples. Of course, there were still 3 empty spots. They were Qin Hao, Ning Tianqing, and Qingji Han. Chapter 1430. Qin Hao looked at the 7 peaks of the Divine Palace. There were several extremely strong Emperor auras in each peak, and the peak masters who were transmitting voice transmissions were even more unfathomable. No matter which peak he entered to cultivate, opportunities could only be encountered by chance. The cultivation directions of the 7 peaks seemed to be different, But when cultivators stepped into the Emperor realm, their Tao techniques were similar. Emperor realm cultivators could see the mysteries of the great Tao of heaven and earth, while Emperor realm cultivators could borrow the power of the great Tao to suppress the common people. Qin Hao had obtained Lord Wu's inheritance, so Emperor realm Tao techniques were not important to him. He just needed to step into the Emperor realm. After all, the burning and meteorite laws had taken shape. With Denda's conditions, entering Tai Wei Peak was undoubtedly the most suitable. However, even if he went to Yaoguang Peak to cultivate music, Qin Hao would not reject it. For him, he only wanted to enter the Emperor realm. As for which peak he cultivated in, he was fine with it. Therefore, Qin Hao did not stand out like the others. He was not in a hurry to decide which peak he should go to. The strange thing was that during this period, none of the peak masters took the initiative to invite him. On the divine grass platform, Northgate Xuanda and Tangung only rose 8 feet. Qin Hao's nourishment of the divine grass reached the clouds. Perfected Lord Tai Wei should be more tempted. Not only the divine grass platform, but also the 5 arenas of Fallen Emperor Bay were all created by Qin Hao. None of the peak masters took the initiative to invite him to their peak. Was it really like what black-robed Emperor Yuan said? Was Qin Hao's talent really unteachable? Ning Tianxing was the opposite of Qin Hao. Qin Hao was not picky and could go to any peak. Among these 6 peaks, Ning Tianxing did not like them. He longed to enter the Divine Palace's main peak and become the Palace Master's disciple. Qin Hao's talent was unparalleled, and he was the #1 conqueror. However, Ning Tianxing's talent was not bad either. He had the Emperor's providence and the power of 3 souls. Why couldn't he enter the Palace Master's sect? As for Qing Jihan, she deliberately did not enter Daozong Peak because of her grudge with Xiaohan. Perfected Lord Daozong's invitation was also decisively rejected by her. In order to vent his anger, he had missed the opportunity to become the Peak Master's disciple. Until now, she was suddenly at a loss, not knowing what to do next. I heard that among the disciples this time, there was a junior named Qin Hao who struck the drum 81 times and destroyed the drum platform. Stepping on the Golden Bell platform, the Golden Bell soared into the sky. Fusing 10 images into one, refining 10,000 arts in a fire, divine grass into the clouds. Its height could not be seen, fate did not appear, but the Emperor's mirror collapsed. Who is Qin Hao? At this moment, an extremely majestic voice came from the direction of the main peak. The voice was as loud as a heavenly bell, shaking the heavens and earth. It was as if the will of the heavens had invaded their minds, and no one could resist it. More than 700 people trembled at the same time. So strong, Xiao said. When his voice entered their ears, they felt as if their souls were being annihilated. I'm afraid that even the peak masters from earlier couldn't compare to the power contained in that voice. Yi Shuihan was secretly shocked. Among the 7 peaks, each peak had the aura of several emperors, and the cultivation of the peak masters was obviously above these emperors. And the majestic voice that came from a main peak was actually stronger than the peak masters. How terrifying was the heritage of the Divine Palace. Disciple Qin Hao greets the senior. Qin Hao took a step forward. Although he didn't know who the messenger was, since it came from the direction of the main peak, its identity must be extremely noble. In an instant, an invisible will enveloped his body, and Qin Hao felt as if he was being restrained. At this moment, he couldn't produce the slightest bit of strength. It was as if an invisible palm was choking his throat, and in just a few seconds, his hands were already sweating. Sure enough, you are talented. I am the Lord of the Divine Palace, Lord Migres. Qin Hao, are you willing to become the disciple of the old man? The will that suppressed the world disappeared, and the voice continued. The 700 disciples were shocked. The Lord of the Divine Palace? Among the 7 peaks, the peak in the center was Migres Peak. The Peak Master, Lord Migres, was also the palace lord in charge of everything in the Divine Palace. Moreover, he sent a voice transmission to accept Qin Hao as his disciple. Although many martial artists had guessed that this would happen, with Qin Hao's monstrous talent, he would definitely be noticed by the palace lord. If someone wanted to accept him as a disciple, it had to be the lord of the divine palace. However, when it really happened, everyone still couldn't help but feel shocked. That couldn't be better. Qin Hao smiled helplessly. He had come to the divine palace with great difficulty, but no one wanted to accept him. Fortunately, someone had spoken, and the other party was the lord of the divine palace. Realizing that he had lost his composure at this time, Qin Hao straightened his face, bowed, and said, "Disciple is willing to enter the Migrez palace." Crack! Ning Tianxing seemed to hear a thunderclap in his ears. Sure enough, he chose Qin Hao first. After 1,000 years of silence, the palace lord also has the intention to accept a disciple. I'd expected that he would accept Qin Hao, so I didn't invite him before. It's really a big loss for my Tai Wei Peak. An extremely helpless voice sounded at Tai Wei Peak. Isn't it also a loss for my Kaiyang Palace? In the void, Kaiyang Battle Lord's roar was like thunder. In fact, the 6 peak masters of the Divine Palace all had the intention of recruiting Qin Hao, but the main peak was bigger, and Migrez Palace was the current lord of the Divine Palace, so they had to give it to him. What's more, even if they tried to snatch him, they wouldn't be able to. It seems that not all the best disciples of each session have the opportunity to become senior Migrez's disciple. Zhou Wudao looked at Shou Wuk in amazement. Qin Hao is in luck, Shou Wuk said. Creak. Hearing the conversation between the two, Ning Tianxing secretly clenched his fists in the crowd. All kinds of signs indicated that Migrez Palace's requirements for accepting a disciple were extremely harsh, and in 1,000 years, he had not accepted a single one. Now, Qin Hao had attracted the attention of Migrez Palace Lord with his peerless talent and had become the Palace Lord's disciple. Then he didn't know if he, Crown Prince Ning Wu, was qualified to impress the Divine Palace and become their second personal disciple. Chapter 1431. With this thought in mind, Ning Tianxing took a step forward, bowed, and said, "Disciple Ning Tianxing comes from an imperial family in the southern region. I have the fate of the great emperor and the power of 3 souls. I beg to enter Migrez Peak and become a disciple of the palace master." Everyone looked at Ning Tianxing. He begged to enter Migrez Peak and become the second personal disciple of the palace master. Although the palace master's requirements for accepting disciples were bound to be extremely harsh, with Crown Prince Ning Wu's talent, he could give it a try. After all, among the signs, Ning Tianxing was indeed extremely strong, perhaps second only to Qin Hao. Mo Xian also glanced at Ning Tianxing. So he spoke directly, and it was a plea. "My Migrez Peak's imperial techniques are unfathomable and cannot be controlled without great perseverance. Since you come from an imperial family and can endure hardships, it is obviously not suitable for you." Palace Master Migrez transmitted his voice indifferently. These words were quite similar to the conversation between Ning Tianxing and Yaowang Deity Lord. Yaowang Deity Lord invited Ning Tianxing to enter Yaowang Peak to practice music, but Ning Tianxing refused with the reason that music was difficult and he couldn't endure hardships. Now, Crown Prince Ning Wu begged to enter Migrez Peak, and true Lord Migrez used this as an excuse to refuse Ning Tianxing. It was really the cycle of life and death. Ning Tianxing's face became extremely ugly. How should he answer? Should he say that this disciple can endure hardships without complaint? Once this sentence was said, it would undoubtedly offend Yaowang Deity Lord. Of course, as a peak master of the Divine Palace, Yaowang Deity Lord's tolerance was as vast as the sea. She might not really take it to heart, but the disciples of Yaowang Peak would never let it go. Ning Tianxing already had the intention of belittling Yaowang Peak, but the peak master didn't take it to heart. How could this disciple swallow this anger? If he offended a peak disciple, his days in the Divine Palace would not be easy. At the very least, Mo Xian's gaze towards Ning Tianxing had become much sharper. Moreover, above Mo Xian, there was still the senior brother of the Yaowang Peak from the previous world. For a moment, Ning Tianxing fell into an extremely awkward situation. Don't worry about it. My cloud shift peak cultivates the Tao of array formations. Normally, I'll just draw some talismans and use my Yuan Qi and Soul Force to form array diagrams. Although it consumes a bit of mental strength, it's not too much of a hardship. Why don't you come to my cloud shift peak? At this moment, perfected Lord Yun Yi said generously. Haha. Xiaowu couldn't help but laugh out loud. Yuni peak? The cultivation array. Not to mention the rank 2 disciples. Even the rank 3 disciples were too lazy to go. This time, there were more than 700 martial artists, but only a little more than 20 of them entered Uni Peak. Moreover, they were the weakest among the rank 3 talents. Now, True Lord Cloudies had taken the initiative to invite Crown Prince Wu Ning, who possessed the Emperor's providence and the power of 3 souls. Ning Tianxing was really unlucky. Xiaowu wasn't the only one laughing. Shou Wuk, Zhou Wu Dao, and the others also unconsciously curled their lips. They wanted to see how Crown Prince Wu Ning would react and whether he would accept or not. Or rather, whether he had the guts to reject perfected Lord Cloudies again. After all, Ning Tianxing had already offended the Peak Master, Yao Wang Immortal Lord. I'm willing to join Uni Peak. With endless frustration, Ning Tianxing hardened his heart and nodded. Since Palace Lord Migrez had already rejected him, he had no chance of joining Yaoguang Peak. Although Uni Peak was slightly inferior and Ning Tianxing didn't understand array formation, he would still be a Peak Master's disciple after agreeing. At the very least, his status would be higher than a rank 3 disciple. It was also old man Yin Yi's fault. Why did he have to step forward himself? It would have been better if he had switched Peak Masters. At this moment, Ning Tianxing looked at Mizar Palace with a strong desire. Ah, good. I'll accept you as my good disciple. Perfected Lord Cloudies let out an extremely carefree laugh. When it entered Ning Tianxing's ears, he felt as if the world was spinning. Qingji Han, my Yaoguang Peak has a meditation sutra. Although it doesn't have a strong offensive power, this mental cultivation technique can resist the invasion of all sounds in the world, slay one's inner demons, refine one's Tao heart, and purify one's soul. Are you willing to join me? An extremely beautiful and gentle voice came from Yaoguang Peak. Qingji Han shuddered and immediately said in joy, I'm willing to join Yaoguang Peak. Resist the invasion of all sounds, slay one's inner demons, refine one's Tao heart, and purify one's soul. This was an extremely powerful mental cultivation technique. It could be said to be the natural enemy of all martial artists who attacked using music. Once the meditation sutra was used, all sounds would die down. Moreover, it could slay one's inner demons and help a martial artist enter the Emperor's Tao. Clearly, it wasn't as weak as Yaoguang Immortal Lord had said. It was most likely the ultimate technique of Yaoguang Peak. Meditation Sutra. Qin Hao murmured and looked at Yaoguang Peak. If there was a chance, he would have to pay a visit to Senior Yaoguang. The ceremony to enter the peak is over. The disciples of each peak will enter their respective dojos. Those who are not from the peak are not allowed to privately impart their techniques. Violators will be expelled from the Divine Palace. Qin Hao, come to the Migrez Palace. True Lord Migrez ordered sternly. Immediately, a beam of light flew from the direction of Migrez Peak. It was extremely fast and arrived in front of Qin Hao in the blink of an eye. Qin Hao looked over and saw that it was a futon. Was he going to sit on it? That was probably it. Qin Hao lifted the corner of his clothes and sat down. Immediately, the futon carried him straight to Migrez Peak. The Palace Lord's disciple is indeed different. He came specifically to pick me up. Lei Jiao stared and then looked at the Mizang Hall that was 10,000 meters high in the clouds. At this time, he was at the foot of the mountain. A winding path extended to the top of Mizang Peak. He didn't know how long it would take to walk. Not only Mizang Palace, but the other 6 palaces were also like this. Flying in the air? Would the Divine Palace allow it? No one dared to try. After all, it was the first day of school. Who knew if flying in the sky would violate the rules? Qin Hao was lucky. True Lord Migres threw out a grass ball and picked him up. Let's go too. Shouwuk smiled. Together with Zhou Wudao, Xiao Han, and the others, they climbed Daozong Peak step by step. At this moment, it really felt like they were wholeheartedly seeking the Tao. Ning Tianxing looked at Uni Peak. Even though he was extremely unwilling, he obediently took a step forward. Every step was incomparably heavy. Qingji Han, Imo Xian, and Chanhe Lo went to Yaoguang Peak. Tan Geng, Northgate Xuanda, and a group of pharmacists and alchemists went to Taiwei Peak. Xiaogua went to Xintian Peak. The divine palace's search for the Tao of emperors began today. In the air, Qin Hao sat on a praying mat as he sped through the air. Very soon, he arrived at the Migres Great Hall. Stepping down, he saw a jade palace with immortal qi swirling around it. It was as sacred and dignified as an immortal palace, giving people an intense feeling of worship. In my previous life, I stepped into the peak of the third realm of the Great Emperor realm. People said that I was invincible. However, the Divine Palace's powerhouses had not appeared yet. Qin Hao respected the Divine Palace. It was a place that people yearned for and feared. If the Divine Palace entered the world, no empire would be able to withstand its attack. Now, he had stepped in front of the Migres Hall and officially become a disciple of the Divine Palace. Moreover, he was the disciple of the Palace Lord. It could be said that he had fulfilled a wish of his previous life. I wonder what realm of the Great Emperor realm Master Migres' cultivation has reached. Qin Hao was a little excited as he stepped in. The Migres Hall was very grand, but it was also very cold. When Qin Hao walked in, there was no grand scene of disciples standing in 2 rows in the hall to welcome him. He smiled in his heart. Master Migres' requirements for accepting disciples were indeed extremely harsh. He was afraid that he would be the only disciple of the Migres Hall. Although there were no disciples of Lord Migres in the hall, there were 2 figures sitting cross-legged in meditation. Both of them had their eyes closed, as if they did not notice Qin Hao's arrival. The person on the left was wearing a purple robe and a laurel crown. He had white hair and a youthful face, and his whole body was full of celestial qi. Judging from his snow-white hair and unfathomable aura, he was at least 1,000 years old. However, his appearance was not much older than Qin Hao. He also looked like a young man. The person on the right was much older. Although his hair was black and shiny, his face was full of wrinkles. Compared with the clothes of the celestial saint youth on the left, this elder's clothes were simply too shabby. He was wearing plain cotton clothes from head to toe, and an inconspicuous gray rope was wrapped around his waist. However, his aura was also unfathomable. For a moment, Qin Hao was stumped. Which one was Lord Migres? Disciple Qin Hao greets Master. After thinking about it, Qin Hao walked in front of the old man in plain cotton clothes and slowly cupped his hands in greeting. Junior brother, you have mistaken me for someone else. We are both disciples of the Migres Hall. I am your senior brother, Changyu. The old man slowly opened his eyes and smiled kindly. Ahem, senior brother's aura is as deep as the abyss. When you sit here, you give people a feeling of boundless. My cultivation is low, and I am new here. I was shocked by senior brother for a moment. Don't blame me, don't blame me. Qin Hao was incomparably embarrassed. Junior brother, you are modest. To be able to enter Master's eyes, your talent will definitely reach my level in the future. Senior brother Changyu smiled. I will try my best. Qin Hao scratched his head and immediately looked at the young man on the left. He could not help but feel surprised. Master Migres, it can't be him, right? You really can't judge a book by its cover. I didn't expect Master to be so greedy and maintain his appearance so well. Qin Hao moved a few steps to the left and bowed to the young man with cupped fists. Disciple Qin Hao greets Master Migres. Junior brother, don't play with me. Since Changyu and I are sitting together, we are both disciples of the Migres Hall. My name is Eastern Sky, and I am your senior brother. Changyu is your second senior brother. The young man said helplessly and fiercely glanced at old Changyu next to him. Since this old thing opened his mouth to explain, why didn't he also explain his identity? If this was discovered by the old man behind, he would think that Eastern Sky wanted to replace him as the master of the Divine Palace. This, Qin Hao was stunned. The young man with white hair and a ruddy complexion was also just a disciple of the Migres Hall. He originally thought that Migres' lord had no disciples, but two suddenly appeared. Moreover, the aura of these two people was unfathomable. Standing in front of them, even Qin Hao and Dinda's spiritual senses were also strongly oppressed. This proved that the two senior brothers in front of him were not much inferior to Qin Hao in his previous life. On the other hand, they were merely disciples of true Lord Migres. How powerful was true Lord Migres himself? What are you shouting about? At this time, a loud voice like a bell came. Qin Hao trembled and immediately recognized that it was the voice that came from Migres Peak when he was at the foot of the mountain. At that time, being suppressed by that will, Qin Hao could not summon the slightest strength to resist. It was extremely terrifying. Each peak master of the Divine Palace's 7 peaks was good at different cultivation directions. Migres Peak gathered the strengths of the 7 peaks, and the palace master was proficient in all of them. He was truly worthy of being the palace master. Cough, cough. Master has many tricks up his sleeve. Junior brother will know in the future. Dong Tianyi spoke, his tone filled with deep meaning. Palace master Migres glared at Dong Tian and waved his hand to signal Qin Hao to stop. He turned around and said, Qin Hao, I already know of your results in the Fallen Emperor Bay test. The war drums sounded 81 times, the golden bell soared into the sky, and the refining of 10,000 methods into one. Even among the previous disciples of the Divine Palace, where geniuses are as common as clouds, such abilities are rare. You are the only one who has broken 5 records. I am very lucky to have accepted a disciple like you. Master, you are too kind. It is my blessing to be your disciple. Qin Hao said. Palace Master Migres waved his hand. Your abilities are ever-changing, but in the path of cultivation, there is still a distinction between primary and secondary. Migres Hall can only give you guidance. As for how good your future is, it will depend on your own performance. How about this? You go and rest first, ease your fatigue, and when you have enough energy, we will decide the direction of your emperor's path tomorrow. Everything is arranged by Master. Qin Hao said. After months of tempering in the Imperial Bay, he was indeed a little tired. Migres nodded. Changyu, take your junior brother to his residence and prepare some recovery pills. Yes, Master. Changyu led the way for Qin Hao. I'll go too. Eastern Sky eagerly followed, afraid that he would be assigned a cultivation task if he stayed. Qin Hao sighed. His 2 senior brothers were too enthusiastic. He thought that the Divine Palace had strict rules, but when he arrived at Migres Palace, he felt the warmth of home. Master and his 2 senior brothers were so approachable, without the slightest arrogance of a powerhouse. At the back of the main hall, there were several pavilions. Eastern Sky and Changyu led Qin Hao into one of the pavilions. Eastern Sky said, Junior brother, this will be your personal cultivation residence in the future. The one next door is your second senior brother Changyu, and the back is my cultivation place. The last one in Migres Palace is Master's cultivation place. Sorry to trouble you, senior brothers. Yeah, there's another pavilion to my right. Whose is it? Qin Hao said. There were 4 pavilions behind Migres Palace. Well, Eastern Sky and Changyu's expressions froze, and sorrow inadvertently flowed in their eyes. They forced a smile and said, It's empty. Don't worry about it. If you encounter any obstacles in your cultivation, you can first ask your second senior brother for help. If you can't solve it, then come to me. Chapter 1433. Leaving the 5-colored Emperor Net immortal behind, Dong Tian and Changyu left the pavilion to avoid disturbing Qin Hao's rest. Looking at the elixir bottles on the table and the five-colored immortal herb in his hand, Qin Hao truly felt a strong warmth. In the outside sect, in order to gain the favor of the elders and obtain cultivation resources, which disciple did not desperately show off their abilities, deceiving and scheming against each other, and even killing each other behind their backs. Although there were only 4 people in the Migres Palace, it reflected the sincere friendship of the same sect. On the first day of entering, the 2 senior brothers treated Qin Hao like an elder brother. Senior brothers have something on their minds. I wonder who they left the immortal herb for. Qin Hao put the 5-colored immortal herb into the space ring, waved at the table, and grabbed several elixir bottles in his hand, and walked to the bedroom. After rushing all the way to the fallen Emperor Bei and experiencing several months of cruel training, his body, mind, and spirit needed to be adjusted. Then, he had to strive to enter the Emperor realm. In the Divine Palace, the spiritual energy was rich and majestic, and with the elixir provided by Tai Peak, the peak masters and elders of the various peaks guided the disciples to enter the Emperor realm. Such a strong teaching force was far from what the outside sect or family could compare to. It was no wonder that the Divine Palace was praised by the world as the holy land for cultivating the Emperor realm. Lying on the bed, Qin Hao quickly entered the dreamland. His body and will relaxed, and the spiritual energy around Migres Peak turned into thousands of wisps and rushed over, penetrating his skin and gathering in his sea of qi, nourishing his lost vitality. After taking the elixir given by senior brother Changyu, Qin Hao was recovering to his peak state at an astonishing speed. The next day, the morning bell of the Divine Palace rang, and the 7 peaks became active. On the first day of school, the peak masters set up a training ground to preach, but the disciples of the other peaks were not allowed to listen in on the 7 peaks, so as to avoid learning too much and affecting the direction of the Emperor realm. Migres Peak. Qin Hao washed up and went to the Migres Palace from the pavilion. Lord Migres once said that today he would determine the direction of the Emperor realm for Qin Hao, and he must not let the master and other disciples, as that would be too rude. According to what Li Wanji said, his enchantment techniques came from Empress Xiantian, and Empress Xiantian came from the Divine Palace. On the way, Qin Hao pondered as he walked, his expression solemn. Entering the Divine Palace and stepping into the Divine Emperor realm was only one of his goals. In addition, there was another important task. Li Wanji asked him to investigate the cause of Empress Xuantian's death. Yesterday, the 7 peaks of the Divine Palace were selecting disciples. The peak master of Xiantian Peak was Lord Xiantian, who was good at inscriptions, which coincided with the emperor technique that Li Wanji's master, Empress Xiantian, was good at. It was certain that Empress Xiantian came from Xiantian Peak. She might even be the previous lord of Xiantian. The Divine Palace has a long history, and the peak masters of the 7 peaks are the pillars of the Divine Palace. Presumably, the previous peak masters respected their titles. When the old peak master retired, the new peak master would inherit the title of the old peak master and become the new sect master. Qin Hao knew very well that the older the sect and family, the more they paid attention to etiquette, because etiquette was where the soul was, and it was a kind of belief and symbol that could not be trampled or abandoned. Then, could Lord Xiantian, the peak master of Xiantian Peak, be the disciple of Empress Xiantian, who died in the Hidden Dragon's secret realm? The disciple killed the master and took the power of the peak? The thought flashed through his mind, but Qin Hao directly rejected this guess. There was no evidence, and it was too arbitrary. It was not so easy to kill a great emperor, unless one party had overwhelming power. But who dare to say that they could crush a great emperor? Moreover, a battle broke out in the Emperor realm, and the scene was so shocking that it was impossible for the other peak masters to not notice it. Taking a step back, even if he killed Empress Xiantian with a sneak attack, the disappearance of the old peak master was something that immortal Migres, the master of the Divine Palace, would have to investigate. The death or disappearance of a peak master of the Divine Palace was not a trivial matter, and it was enough to shake the foundation of the Divine Palace. But according to the atmosphere of the Divine Palace yesterday, Everything was normal, and the relationship between the peak masters was very close. Could it be that because the matter of Empress Xiantian was too long ago, the Divine Palace had already solved it? No matter what, since I promised Li Wanji, I have to check it out. Otherwise, I would be sorry for the dragon spirit Dharma form he gave me. Fortunately, I let Guadi enter the Xiantian Peak in advance and become a disciple of the Xiantian Peak. With him there, I can find an excuse to visit Lord Xiantian. Qin Hao nodded and stepped into the Migres Palace. Although the 7 peaks were connected, they also had sectarian views and did not exclude each other. Everything was for the good of the disciples of the Divine Palace. If there was no one familiar with Xiantian Peak, Qin Hao would not be able to go there easily. When he came to the palace, it was extremely quiet. Everyone thought that the 7 peaks of the Divine Palace had the least disciples of Uni Elixir Peak. But they didn't know that the worst was Migres Peak, with only 4 teachers and disciples in 1 peak. Today was even more ridiculous. There was no one in the palace, and even Senior Brother Eastern Sky and Senior Brother Chong were nowhere to be found. No way. Qin Hao felt a headache. On the first day of the preaching, he was the only one left in 1 peak. "Oh, you're up. How's your recovery?" A voice as loud as a bell came, and the hale and hearty Lord Migres appeared in the palace, as if he had been waiting for a long time. "Good morning, Master." Migres Peak is full of spirit energy, and with the elixir given by Senior Brother, disciples' fatigue was swept away overnight, and I feel unprecedentedly energetic. Qin Hao walked with a strong and powerful gait. "I asked him to give it to you. You don't have to thank Yu." "Oh, right? Why didn't you go to other peaks to listen?" Lord Migres said. "Go to other peaks to listen?" Qin Hao felt a little baffled. Didn't Master say that today is the day to determine the cultivation direction of the Emperor's path? The cultivation direction is not urgent. Every time a new disciple enters the Divine Palace, each peak must set up a training ground, and the peak master will personally preach for 7 days. It can be said that time is precious and can be said to be the most enlightening 7 days in a disciple's life. Our Migres Peak is the same. According to the rules, we preach for 7 days. However, my way is different from other peak masters. I don't teach. You go to other peaks to learn. Go wherever you want, and listen to whichever peak master is good. No matter which peak, they will not drive away the disciples of Migres Peak. Your 2 senior brothers have probably left long ago. Didn't they tell you yesterday? Lord Migres also felt very puzzled. It was an old rule. Why didn't Qin Hao understand? Qin Hao suddenly felt that the old man in front of him was extremely black-bellied and unscrupulous. He was worlds apart from Master Migres, who said that he was proficient in everything. It turned out that the so-called music formations, refining, alchemy, and offensive techniques were all taught by others. And Lord Migres himself did not teach. "What? You still don't understand?" Lord Migres asked. "I go to other peaks to listen." Qin Hao said. "Yes. None of the peaks will drive you away. They have the guts, unless they don't want to stay in the Divine Palace." Lord Migres said with incomparable pride. Qin Hao secretly clenched his fists. If he had known earlier, he would not have let Siowa go to Xiantian Peak. Anyway, no matter which peak the disciples of Migres Palace went to, they would not be driven away. It turned out that this was the treatment of a disciple of the Palace Master. Disciple will take his leave. Qin Hao turned around and ran out. Chapter 1435. Translator, Nioibo Studio Editor. Nioibo Studio for Seat Tian K. Qin Hao's lips curled up. If Tian K wanted to draw his attention and lure Senior Sister to Daozong Peak, then Senior Brother Eastern Sky would be gravely mistaken. My will is firm. How can I be seduced by a woman? Qin Hao proudly rolled up his sleeves. Floating light flashed beneath his feet as he landed on Xiantian Peak. Xiantian Peak. A majestic ancient temple stood on the peak. Below the ancient temple, there were several palaces on both sides. One side was where the disciples lived, while the other was where the elders rested. Each of the 7 peaks of the divine palace had a different environment. Take Shintian Peak, for example. The peak was highly evaporated like a furnace. Burning furnaces could be seen everywhere, as well as forging weapons and rare ores. Today, the profound Heaven Immortal Lord was teaching here, and the training ground was set up below the ancient temple. At this time, the Shintian training ground was a grand scene. More than 100 furnaces were arranged in a very orderly manner. Beside each furnace, there was a disciple guarding it. The disciples held casting hammers in their hands and hammered them down one after another. Some of them were hammering the ores to remove the impurities in the ores, while others were urging the soul fire with their palms to smelt the metal in the furnace. The sound of hammering iron and the sound of burning could be heard incessantly. Under the shroud of the high temperature, more than 100 disciples of mysterious sky palace were sweating profusely, but they were still very busy. Sayogwa was among the disciples. His furnace was at the front of the formation. After all, he was the only personal disciple of the profound Heaven Immortal Lord among this batch of candidates. He was the focus of training. At this time, Qin Hao landed on Shintian Peak. The familiar aura naturally attracted Sayogwa's attention. "Big brother, why are you here?" Sayogwa was pleasantly surprised. He threw away the forging hammer in his hand and turned to greet Tian Quebec. At this moment, countless eyes followed Sayogwa. The person who greeted the Peak Lord's personal disciple naturally attracted the attention of the disciples of Shintian Hall. When they saw Qin Hao, everyone was stunned for a moment. Qin Hao, Gu Kuei was very surprised. Yesterday, Qin Hao was chosen by the Divine Palace Lord and taken to Migre's palace. Why would he come here today? This was not surprising. However, as a member of Migre's palace, coming to Shintian Peak was clearly a violation of the rules. The 7 peaks had forbidden people from other peaks from entering except for the disciples of their own peaks. This was a ban personally issued by the Lord of the Divine Palace. Qin Hao had violated the rules. "I came to see my brother." Qin Hao looked at Gu Kuei, the Divine Palace Lord. Studio, Gu Kuei was Mo was.